The courtroom buzzed with anticipation, the air thick with tension as the clock struck 10. Spectators whispered in hushed tones, their eyes fixated on the entrance. They knew this would be no ordinary trial. Today, they would witness something that could change the course of not just a lawsuit, but the entire way the public viewed the man sitting at the defendant's table. Elon Musk, the billionaire tech mogul who had redefined industries with SpaceX, Tesla, and countless other ventures, sat there with an air of quiet confidence. His hands rested calmly on the table in front of him, his gaze sharp, as though the world outside this courtroom didn't exist. His face, as usual, betrayed no emotion, but his mind was working 100 miles a minute. Musk was no stranger to controversy, but this trial was different. He wasn't just fighting for his company's reputation. He was fighting to prove that he was more than the eccentric billionaire many thought him to be. This time, he was fighting for something bigger, the future of innovation itself. The judge, a woman with decades of experience in the legal system, sat at the bench, looking down at Musk with a mix of skepticism and curiosity. Judge Samantha Collins had heard plenty of cases in her career, but none quite like this. Elon Musk was not like the usual defendants who stumbled through their defenses, trying to escape the consequences of their actions. No, Musk was a calculated risk-taker, and that made him dangerous in the eyes of the law. Collins adjusted her glasses and cleared her throat, her voice booming through the silence of the room. "Mr. Musk, your case is one of the most unusual I've encountered in my time on the bench. I hope you're prepared for what lies ahead." She shot him a pointed glance, her tone both dismissive and authoritative. Elon Musk didn't flinch. He sat up straight, exuding an air of confidence that made many in the room uneasy. He had faced worse, far worse, during his rise to fame. A court battle? This was just another challenge in the grand scheme of things. As the proceedings began, Musk's legal team presented their opening statements. Their words were smooth, rehearsed, and calculated, but it was clear that the focus wasn't just on the facts. Musk was on trial for a series of controversial business practices, but the true question everyone was asking was whether he was truly guilty of the accusations, or whether this was just the system trying to take down one of the most successful and unconventional entrepreneurs in the world. Judge Collins couldn't help but roll her eyes as Musk's lead attorney spoke. She had heard it all before. The lofty rhetoric, the corporate jargon, the self-assuredness that bordered on arrogance. But the judge was seasoned. She had seen countless men and women walk into her courtroom full of bravado, only to crumble under pressure. And Musk, despite his reputation, was no different. He was just another man caught in the web of the law. She would show him that no one, no matter how wealthy or influential, was above the legal system. Musk's defense, however, wasn't one of simple innocence. It was a challenge to the very legal system itself. They weren't just here to prove that Musk had not done anything wrong. They were here to show that the system, in its traditional form, was ill-suited to handle the complexities of modern business. Musk wasn't your typical defendant. He was a visionary, a man whose actions often defied convention. The jury would need more than just facts and evidence. They would need to understand the bigger picture. And that was exactly what Musk intended to show them. As the prosecutor began his argument, Musk leaned back in his chair, his fingers steepling in front of him. The opposing lawyer tried to paint Musk as a reckless billionaire, one who had manipulated the system for his own gain. But Musk remained unmoved, his eyes never leaving the courtroom, never showing a hint of vulnerability. The prosecutor's words were sharp, accusing Musk of a series of financial misdeeds, misleading investors, and damaging public trust. Musk, the prosecutor claimed, had used his status to manipulate the truth and mislead those who trusted him. The room shifted uncomfortably as the prosecutor presented evidence, each point building toward a damning picture of a man who believed he was above the law. But Musk's defense was about to take a turn no one was expecting. As the prosecutor finished, Musk's legal team stood up, ready to respond. The lead attorney, a sharp and strategic thinker, began with a seemingly innocuous statement. "Ladies and gentlemen, what you are about to hear is the other side of the story, the side that isn't told in these courtroom walls." Judge Collins raised an eyebrow, intrigued despite herself. The defense had been fairly standard so far, but this was different. She had the nagging feeling that something was coming. something that would challenge everything she thought she knew about this case. "We're not here to tell you that Mr. Musk is perfect," the attorney continued. "But we are here to tell you that the system that is prosecuting him isn't prepared for the kind of innovation he's pushing forward. And we intend to prove that." The words hung in the air like a challenge. Musk wasn't just trying to win a lawsuit. He was trying to change the very narrative around innovation and business. It was a bold move, one that would either result in victory or downfall. As the first day of the trial came to an end, Judge Collins found herself unable to shake the feeling that this was going to be more than just a legal battle. She had heard the rhetoric, seen the tactics, and watched as Musk maintained his poised composure. But there was something else going on here. Something deeper. Something that had nothing to do with the case at hand. Musk was a master at manipulating perception, and she couldn't help but wonder, was he playing the long game? Or was he simply a man who had managed to outwit the system once again? Hit subscribe and leave a comment with where you're watching from. This story might just spark a new beginning. What's one thing that always pushes you forward, even when things get tough? The words echoed in Musk's mind as he left the courtroom, his mind already moving to the next step in the strategy he had so carefully crafted. The courtroom had been quiet for days now, but the truth of the case had yet to emerge. Every word, every argument was being meticulously dissected by the jury, but no one fully understood what had driven Elon Musk to this point. His life wasn't like anyone else's, and this lawsuit wasn't just about defending his business. It was about understanding the man behind the companies, the controversies, and the headlines. Musk's journey had never been typical. Born in Pretoria, South Africa, in 1971, he had always been driven by an insatiable curiosity. At a young age, Musk was already consumed with a fascination for technology, space, and the future. His early years were marked by the kind of intellectual prowess that set him apart from his peers. By the time he was a teenager, Musk had taught himself how to program and created his first video game, which he sold for $500. That was just the beginning. His early years weren't without their struggles, though. Musk's parents separated when he was young, and he lived with his father for a period, an experience that was, by his own admission, difficult and sometimes emotionally painful. His father was a complex figure, a man of sharp intellect, but also someone who could be distant and demanding. This created a complicated dynamic for young Elon, who sought approval from his father but often felt misunderstood. These early experiences would shape Musk into the man he would later become, independent, self-reliant, and laser-focused on his goals. After moving to Canada and then the U.S. to attend school, Musk's vision began to take shape. He attended the University of Pennsylvania, where he earned degrees in both economics and physics. These disciplines gave him a unique perspective on the world, one that blended business acumen with a deep understanding of the scientific principles that would drive his innovations. By the time he founded Zip2, an online software company, in 1995, Musk was already beginning to make waves. His ability to see opportunities where others saw risks was becoming apparent, and Zip2 sold to Compaq for nearly $300 million just a few years later. But for Musk, the sale wasn't the end. It was just the beginning. He used the proceeds to start X.com, a financial technology company that would eventually become PayPal. PayPal's success solidified Musk's reputation as a tech visionary. He had taken on the banking system itself, challenging the way people thought about online payments. When eBay acquired PayPal for $1.5 billion in stock, Musk was set to make even more money. But that wasn't enough for him. While others would have retired or settled into a life of luxury, Musk turned his focus elsewhere, towards space exploration and sustainable energy. His journey would take him to new heights, both figuratively and literally. Musk founded SpaceX in 2002 with the mission to make space travel more affordable and eventually enable the colonization of Mars. He didn't just want to launch rockets. He wanted to change humanity's future. His work with Tesla, which started shortly after, was just as ambitious: to revolutionize the automotive industry and bring electric vehicles into the mainstream. Musk's ventures were always more than just business opportunities. They were crusades, driven by his belief in a better future. And yet, despite his monumental successes, Musk found himself in the midst of controversy time and time again. His ambitious projects often pushed the boundaries of what was considered possible, and sometimes they went too far. Whether it was his infamous tweet about taking Tesla private or his clashes with regulatory agencies, Musk's actions often seemed to defy the conventions of corporate behavior. And now, here he was, facing another lawsuit. A high-profile legal battle that threatened to derail not just one of his companies but his entire legacy. The specifics of the lawsuit were complex, but at its core, it revolved around accusations that Musk had misled investors, used his public persona to manipulate stock prices, and failed to meet regulatory requirements in several of his ventures. The lawsuit wasn't just about a few bad decisions or mistakes. It was about questioning whether Musk had taken his unconventional methods too far. Had his boldness crossed the line into something more insidious? Or was he simply a visionary misunderstood by those who couldn't keep up? Elon Musk had become a lightning rod for both admiration and criticism. To some, he was a genius, someone who had pushed the boundaries of technology, business, and space exploration. To others, he was a reckless billionaire with a tendency to bend the rules and ignore the consequences. But one thing was clear. Musk was not someone who played by the rules. The very qualities that made him successful, his refusal to accept conventional thinking, his willingness to take risks, were the same ones that made him a target in court. Judge Collins, sitting on the bench, had heard all the details of the case. She was no stranger to high-profile trials, but even she couldn't deny the complexity of this one. The lawsuit against Musk had the potential to rewrite the way the business world operated. If Musk were found guilty, it could set a dangerous precedent, one that would stifle innovation and penalize risk-takers. If he were acquitted, it could open the door to a new way of thinking about corporate responsibility, a way that questioned traditional legal and financial structures. As she studied the case, Judge Collins couldn't help but wonder if this trial was more than just about the law. Musk was a disruptor, and this courtroom was just another arena for his brand of disruption. What Musk had done in the tech world, in space exploration, and in the world of electric cars, he was now attempting to do in the courtroom. But would his unorthodox methods succeed here? Or would the legal system prove to be his biggest challenge yet? The more she thought about it, the more Judge Collins realized that this trial was about something bigger than just Musk's legal troubles. It was about the future of business itself. Was the world ready for someone like Musk? Someone who didn't fit the mold of a traditional CEO or businessman? And if the system failed him, what would that mean for the future of innovation? Musk, for his part, remained as calm as ever. He had been here before, fighting against odds, challenging conventions, and facing overwhelming skepticism. He knew that winning this case wasn't just about defeating the lawsuit. It was about proving a point, that visionaries, like him, were necessary to push the world forward, even if the system didn't always understand them. The words were a constant reminder in Musk's mind. For him, it wasn't just about what was at stake today, it was about what could come next. The courtroom might be his battleground now, but the fight was far from over. The courtroom was becoming more than just a space for legal proceedings. It was turning into a battleground for Musk's very identity. The jury, although quietly observing, was keenly aware of the high stakes. They had been tasked with deciding whether the world's most talked-about entrepreneur was guilty of something far more insidious than corporate blunders. Was Elon Musk simply the product of his ambition, or was he, in fact, a mastermind playing the legal system for his own gain? Judge Collins had seen her fair share of complex cases, but this one was different. She couldn't deny it. Musk had a presence that made everything feel amplified. It wasn't just his fame, or the millions riding on the case. It was his ability to challenge norms, to throw every rulebook out the window in favor of his own vision. That vision, however, was now being questioned in ways that would test even the most seasoned lawyers. Over the last few days, Musk's defense had been calculated and methodical. His legal team presented evidence of the technical and visionary aspects of his businesses, SpaceX's groundbreaking work in space exploration, Tesla's role in pushing the automotive industry towards sustainability, and the broader impact of his innovations on global markets. They painted a picture of a man who, despite occasional missteps, had made a positive contribution to the world. But they weren't just defending his actions, they were challenging the very foundation of the accusations against him. The question wasn't whether Musk had made mistakes. The question was whether he was a threat to the very system that claimed to be upholding justice. Meanwhile, The prosecution was equally sharp. They painted Musk as a reckless businessman, someone who played fast and loose with the truth. The evidence they presented was damning. A string of controversial tweets that sent Tesla's stock price soaring or plummeting, the accusations of misleading investors, and the alleged violations of securities laws. They argued that Musk's actions were not just careless. They were deliberate attempts to manipulate the market for personal gain. But the prosecution's case wasn't just about the facts. It was about the man himself. And here's where the case took an unexpected turn. As the second week of the trial unfolded, it became clear that Musk wasn't just fighting the legal system. He was fighting a perception, a narrative that had built up around him for years. During the prosecution's cross-examination, they brought up a series of public statements Musk had made in interviews and on social media. The goal was simple: to paint him as someone who thought he was above the law. Musk's comments about working hard enough to send rockets to Mars and his tendency to disregard conventional corporate wisdom had long been seen as quirky, even charming, by his followers. But the prosecution was framing them differently, turning Musk's words into evidence of a man who saw himself as untouchable, whose disregard for legal norms went beyond the occasional slip-up. Musk, however, remained unfazed. He sat quietly in the courtroom, never showing any sign of cracking under the pressure. His mind was working, though, not just thinking about how to win the case, but how to reshape the entire narrative. It was then that something unexpected happened. A piece of evidence presented by the prosecution triggered a small yet significant shift in the trial's trajectory. They brought in testimony from a former employee at one of Musk's companies, a whistleblower who claimed that Musk had intentionally misled investors during a high-stakes funding round. The whistleblower had been a mid-level executive who had witnessed internal communications suggesting that Musk had exaggerated the potential for a major breakthrough in Tesla's battery technology to boost stock prices. The courtroom gasped. Musk's lawyers immediately objected, but Judge Collins allowed the testimony to continue. As the whistleblower spoke, Musk's expression remained unreadable. He didn't flinch, but it was clear that this new development had the potential to complicate the case for his defense. Musk's legal team scrambled to counter the testimony. They argued that the whistleblower's claims were based on a misunderstanding of Musk's bold business strategies that often involved painting a rosy picture of future success in order to secure investments. They presented evidence that Musk's promises were always grounded in a larger vision for his companies, even if they hadn't always met the ambitious timelines he had set. But the damage was done. The jury was listening, and the seed of doubt had been planted. Was Musk truly the visionary he claimed to be, or was he simply a man who manipulated the system to get what he wanted? As the days passed, tensions rose both inside and outside the courtroom. The media circus surrounding the trial only intensified, and the public's fascination with Musk deepened. Some saw him as a hero, a misunderstood genius who had been unfairly targeted by a system that couldn't handle his innovation. Others, however, were starting to wonder if he was nothing more than a con artist hiding behind a facade of genius. The courtroom became a microcosm of Musk's life, a blend of brilliance and controversy, of lofty ideals and harsh reality. The prosecution worked tirelessly to paint him as a man who had taken shortcuts to achieve his goals, while Musk's defense fought to remind the jury that sometimes changing the world meant bending the rules. But Judge Collins, despite her own biases, couldn't ignore the complexity of the situation. The case was a delicate balancing act, too much in either direction, and it could all come crashing down. She was aware that this trial was about much more than just one person's fate. It was about the future of corporate law, about the role of visionaries in a world that often resisted change. Musk had built his empire by challenging the conventional way of doing things. It wasn't just that he had succeeded where others had failed. It was that he had changed the rules of the game entirely. The question now was, could he do the same in the courtroom? As Judge Collins studied the proceedings, she realized that this trial might not just be about whether Musk was guilty of breaking the law. It was about something much larger. Whether the system, as it stood, was even capable of handling someone like Musk. Musk's thoughts echoed these questions as he sat quietly in the courtroom. The battle was just beginning, but he knew one thing for sure. He had already made his mark. Whether he won or lost this trial, the world would be watching, and the story was far from over. The tension in the courtroom had reached a fever pitch. As the trial progressed, Elon Musk sat silently, his usual poise cloaking his thoughts. The courtroom, once abuzz with the usual noises of legal discourse, now seemed to hum with an undercurrent of suspense. The days had dragged on with the prosecution's arguments seeming airtight, the whistleblower's testimony lingering like a storm cloud. Yet, even amidst the mounting pressure, Musk's demeanor remained calm, almost eerily so. Judge Samantha Collins couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't quite right. The case against Musk was solid enough, at least on the surface. But as the days passed, there was something about Musk that felt different. She had presided over many high-profile cases, but this was the first time she'd felt as though the courtroom itself was a part of a larger game, one that Musk was playing in ways no one truly understood. Her suspicion was growing. Musk was far too composed, far too confident for someone facing such severe accusations. There was something he wasn't telling them, some grand strategy unfolding behind the scenes. It was clear that Musk, the genius billionaire who had transformed industries, wasn't just a man caught up in a lawsuit. He was someone who thrived on challenges like this. And there was something about his current silence that hinted at a masterstroke in the making. The defense team had been preparing for their own moment. They had already presented their case, carefully crafted with facts and figures to support Musk's argument of having made good faith efforts in managing his businesses. Yet there was something that hadn't been addressed, something that Musk knew would tip the scales in his favor. It happened on the morning of the fourth week. The court was filled with the usual air of impatience, the type of restlessness that came with long-winded proceedings. Musk's defense had one more card to play, and it wasn't going to be a standard line of defense. It was going to be an audacious move, one that no one could have anticipated. Musk's attorney, a sharp-minded strategist named Olivia Hartman, stood up to deliver the defense's closing statement. The atmosphere in the room grew tense as she prepared to address the jury, her calm confidence a stark contrast to the intensity of the ongoing trial. "Ladies and gentlemen of the jury," Olivia began, her voice clear and firm, "we've presented all the evidence, all the facts, and all the points that show Elon Musk has done what many of us only dream about. He's pushed the boundaries of possibility. Now, let me ask you one question. What would you do if you were given the opportunity to shape the future?" Judge Collins narrowed her eyes. She was intrigued by this angle. Olivia wasn't just defending Musk. She was challenging the jury to think beyond the evidence, beyond the technicalities of the law. Mr. Musk is not here to apologize for his dreams, nor should he. He's not here to say he hasn't made mistakes. None of us are perfect. But he is here to tell you that we, as a society, should encourage people to push the envelope, to take risks, to disrupt industries. That's how progress is made. That's how we move forward. The courtroom was still, the weight of Olivia's words hanging in the air. "But I have something else to show you," Olivia continued, a sudden, bold shift in her tone. "You've seen the evidence against Mr. Musk. You've heard the testimony from the whistleblower. But I want to show you something that's never been seen before in this trial." She gestured to the back of the courtroom, where her team had set up a projector. A hush fell over the room as the lights dimmed and a video began to play. The image on the screen was grainy at first, but it quickly became clear. It was footage from a private conversation, a recording Musk had made a few years ago, long before the lawsuit had even been filed. In the footage, Musk was speaking candidly to a group of investors, outlining his grand vision for Tesla and SpaceX. He spoke passionately about the future, about humanity's need to explore space and develop sustainable energy. He talked about the necessity of taking bold steps, even when things didn't go according to plan. "Sometimes, the system doesn't understand the bigger picture," Musk said in the video. "But that's what innovation is about. It's about seeing something the rest of the world doesn't yet see. And yes, sometimes you have to paint a picture of the future in a way that makes people believe in it." As the video ended, there was a long silence in the courtroom. Musk didn't flinch as the room processed the footage. Olivia Hartman turned back to the jury, her voice now steady and persuasive. "What you just saw wasn't a man misrepresenting facts to investors. That was a visionary, someone who understood that the future isn't made by playing it safe. He understood that sometimes you have to take risks, bold risks. And yes, Sometimes those risks don't pan out. But does that make a man a criminal? Or does that make him someone who dared to dream? The room was quiet, but the impact was undeniable. Olivia's strategy had been to turn the prosecution's strongest argument into an asset for Musk. Instead of denying his ambitious nature, they embraced it. They reframed Musk's boldness, his willingness to speak in the grandest terms, not as a weakness, but as the very thing that had allowed him to reshape industries. Judge Collins sat back in her chair, clearly taken aback by the unexpected turn of events. She had been preparing for a typical defense strategy, one that would focus on legal loopholes, technicalities, and evidence that could disprove the claims against Musk. Instead, Musk's defense had done something completely unexpected. They had acknowledged the flaws in his approach, but framed them as part of his genius. For a brief moment, Musk allowed himself a small, almost imperceptible smile. He wasn't just defending himself. He was redefining the very narrative of his life. The same boldness that had made him a billionaire had now become the cornerstone of his defense. As the defense team sat down, the courtroom was still. The prosecution had not anticipated this kind of maneuver. It wasn't just about defending Musk's actions. It was about challenging the entire premise of the case. And in doing so, they had put the jury in a position where they had to reconsider everything they thought they knew about him. The jury had been deliberating for hours, but the silence in the courtroom was deafening. Each passing minute seemed to stretch longer than the last, and Elon Musk could feel the weight of the moment pressing down on him. The defense had put everything on the line, turning the narrative of the case into a battle between vision and regulation, between the future and the present. Now, it was out of his hands. The decision rested with the jury, and whatever happened next would define his legacy, perhaps even reshape the course of business and innovation. Judge Collins sat stoically at the bench, her eyes scanning the courtroom, occasionally glancing at the jury's deliberation room. She had seen many cases, but this one was different. This wasn't just a trial of facts, it was a trial of philosophy. Musk had challenged the very foundation of the legal system with his defense. His legal team had reframed the case into one about the future, and that, she realized, was something bigger than the law itself. The thought lingered in her mind. What if the world needed people like Musk? People who pushed boundaries, who didn't always play by the rules, but who changed the world for the better in doing so. And yet, the law was meant to be impartial, to hold everyone accountable, regardless of their intentions. Could it be that Musk's vision was so grand that it had become untouchable? Or was he simply an ordinary man who got in over his head? The clock ticked on, and Musk leaned back in his chair, his fingers drumming lightly on the table. He had already won, in a sense. Regardless of the jury's verdict, he had already made his point. He had turned the courtroom into a stage, and the world had watched as he redefined the rules of engagement. But there was a gnawing feeling at the back of his mind, a question he couldn't shake. Was he truly above reproach? Was his belief in the greater good enough to excuse his lapses in judgment? Hit subscribe and leave a comment with where you're watching from. This story might just spark a new beginning. What's one thing that always pushes you forward, even when things get tough? He had said those words so many times before, but now, sitting in the courtroom, they held a different meaning. The future was full of possibilities, but at this moment, everything hung in the balance. The door to the deliberation room creaked open, and the foreman of the jury stepped out. The tension in the room was palpable as everyone rose to their feet, waiting for the verdict. Musk's heart rate quickened, but his exterior remained calm, like the eye of a storm. He had trained himself to keep his emotions in check, to compartmentalize the pressure, the stress, the stakes. Judge Collins looked at the foreman, who stepped forward with a solemn expression. The entire courtroom fell silent as the foreman cleared his throat, glancing at the jury box. "We, the jury, have reached a verdict." Musk's breath caught in his throat, and he felt his body tense. This was it. This would decide everything. The room seemed to shrink, every inch of air heavy with anticipation. The foreman continued, his voice steady but grave. "On the charge of securities fraud, we find the defendant, Elon Musk, not guilty." For a moment, time seemed to freeze. Musk blinked, his mind slow to process the words he had just heard. Not guilty. The room erupted into a mix of murmurs, sighs of relief, and hushed gasps. Musk's defense team exchanged glances of triumph, while the prosecution stood stone-faced, their case undone in an instant. But for Musk, the feeling wasn't one of victory. It was something more complicated, a relief tinged with uncertainty. He had won the battle, but the war? That was still to be fought. Judge Collins, whose expression remained neutral as ever, nodded curtly. The defendant is free to go. Court is adjourned. As Musk walked out of the courthouse, the press swarm was waiting. Cameras flashed, microphones were thrust toward him. But for once, Musk didn't feel the need to speak. The reporters shouted questions, asking him for his thoughts on the verdict, on his future, on the lessons he had learned. But Musk simply walked past them, his mind racing, his thoughts elsewhere. It wasn't the legal outcome that was on his mind now. It was something deeper. The entire trial, with its moments of tension, conflict, and even mockery, had exposed the gap between innovation and regulation. Musk had played the role of the rebellious genius, someone who saw the future and wasn't afraid to challenge the rules that stood in his way. But now, walking into the world outside the courtroom, he realized that the system he had so often clashed with would continue to evolve, just as he did. The question was, could he continue to thrive in a world that seemed unwilling to accept the very things he was trying to build? It was then that he remembered something he had told a friend years ago, something that felt incredibly relevant now. The only thing that matters is the mission. The rest is just noise. And that, perhaps, was the key to understanding his own success. His mission wasn't just about creating companies or breaking records. It was about reshaping the world. The legal system, the media, the critics, they were all just noise in the background. What mattered was the bigger picture. Back at his office, Musk sat quietly at his desk, alone with his thoughts. The victory in court had been a turning point, but it had also shown him something crucial. The world was always watching. The courtrooms, the media, the public, they all had their expectations, their standards. But none of that mattered if he didn't stay true to his own vision. He looked out the window, his gaze distant, as if seeing beyond the glass into the future. His work was far from done. Tesla was on the cusp of launching a new model that would change the automotive industry forever. SpaceX was preparing for a mission that would make history. And there were always more ideas, more projects to push forward. Musk smiled, a small, private smile. He didn't need to prove anything to anyone anymore. The world would either keep up with him, or it wouldn't. And that was his victory. As he stood up and walked toward the door, ready to face whatever came next, a thought crossed his mind. The road ahead would undoubtedly be filled with challenges, but that's exactly how he liked it. It was the uncertainty, the risks, the unknowns. That was where he thrived. And with that, Musk stepped into the future, a little wiser, a little more resolved. The court had spoken, but the real journey, the one that mattered, was just beginning. It wasn't long after the courtroom drama ended that Elon Musk's world shifted again. The trial was over, and he had emerged victorious, but the sense of closure was fleeting. The victory, while significant, felt somewhat hollow. The storm had passed, but there were always new challenges lurking just beyond the horizon. Musk returned to his daily routine at Tesla and SpaceX, as if nothing had changed. His office was filled with the usual flurry of activity: meetings with engineers, talks with investors, updates on the latest technological advancements. Yet, in the back of his mind, he couldn't shake the realization that the court case had only been one battle in a much larger war. The media, for all their relentless attention, were now moving on to the next big story. Musk had been cleared of any wrongdoing, but the headlines were already shifting toward new controversies. His every move, every tweet, every announcement was being scrutinized in real time. The public had their opinions, and those opinions were as fickle as they were loud. One moment, Musk was hailed as a genius. The next, he was derided as reckless, arrogant, even dangerous. It didn't bother him. It never had. But as he sat in his office late one night, surrounded by stacks of paperwork and models of rockets, he realized that he had never truly understood the nature of his own battle. The trial, the media, the public, these were mere distractions from the real challenge. And it wasn't a challenge that could be solved in a courtroom or through clever PR moves. No, This was a battle for the future of humanity itself, a battle to push the world beyond its limitations and into the stars. The phone on his desk buzzed, pulling him from his thoughts. It was a text message from one of his closest confidants at Tesla. Elon, we've got a problem. Some of our competitors are starting to make moves that could seriously impact our market share. We need to talk. Musk stared at the message, his mind already spinning through the possibilities. Competition had always been a part of the game, but this felt different. This wasn't just about beating other automakers. This was about redefining an entire industry. Tesla wasn't just competing against traditional car companies. It was competing against the very forces that were trying to hold back the future. He typed back quickly, set up a meeting. I want to hear the full details. Minutes later, he was in a meeting with his leadership team. They were discussing the latest moves from legacy car manufacturers, all of whom were ramping up their electric vehicle production. Musk listened carefully as they outlined the specifics: new models, aggressive marketing campaigns, and, most notably, advancements in battery technology. Tesla had been the leader in electric cars for years, but now it was facing an unprecedented wave of competition. Look, Musk said, leaning forward, his voice calm but filled with intensity, we're not just in the car business. We're in the business of changing the world. If we play by their rules, we'll just be another car company. And that's not why we're here. The room fell silent. His team knew exactly what he meant. For years, Musk had pushed the boundaries of what Tesla could achieve. He hadn't just wanted to build a better electric car. He wanted to build a sustainable future. But with new competitors entering the field, that vision was now at risk. Then what do we do? One of his top engineers asked. How do we keep our edge? Musk thought for a moment. He wasn't someone to act on impulse, but sometimes, the best moves were the ones that seemed the most audacious. He stood up and walked to the whiteboard, drawing a few quick lines to map out the next steps. We doubled down on innovation, not just in the cars themselves, but in the infrastructure. Solar energy, supercharging, artificial intelligence. We stop thinking of Tesla as a car company and start thinking of it as an energy company. We become the backbone of a new global system, one that powers everything. His words were met with nods of agreement. Musk wasn't just talking about competing. He was talking about revolutionizing the very nature of the industry. For Musk, this was never about being the biggest or the richest. It was about pushing humanity forward, and the stakes were higher than ever. As the meeting wrapped up, Musk's mind turned back to SpaceX. The battle there was even bigger. Mars wasn't just a dream. It was the future. SpaceX had made incredible strides, but the challenges ahead were enormous. Funding, technology, international politics, these were just a few of the obstacles that lay in his path. But Musk had always thrived in the face of adversity. It was the unknown, the impossible, that fueled him. The next day, he was on a flight to one of SpaceX's launch facilities. The plans for the Mars mission were moving forward, but they needed a major breakthrough, one that would ensure the technology could sustain life on Mars. Musk had his ideas, but the pressure was mounting. The world was watching, and failure was not an option. As the weeks passed, Musk found himself entrenched in yet another battle, one that wasn't fought in courtrooms or boardrooms, but in the heart of innovation itself. The competition in both Tesla and SpaceX had become more intense than ever, and Musk knew that he couldn't afford to rest on his laurels. He had always said that the key to success was to constantly push the envelope, to never settle. But now, with the world watching, the stakes were higher than ever. He spent countless hours at Tesla's gigafactories, overseeing production and brainstorming with engineers. At SpaceX, he was deeply involved in refining the Starship prototype and working on the details of the upcoming Mars mission. He rarely slept, and when he did, it was in short bursts, his mind always racing with the next challenge. It was during one of these late-night sessions that he received a call from an old friend, someone who had been with him from the very beginning, someone who understood the pressures he faced. "Hey, Elon," the voice on the other end said, "I know things are crazy right now, but I need to ask you something. Are you still fighting for the right reasons? Or is this just about winning?" Musk paused, the question striking him deeper than he expected. He hadn't allowed himself to question his motives for years. But in that moment, he realized that the battle he was fighting wasn't just about success. It was about something bigger. It was about leaving a legacy, not just as a businessman, but as someone who had dared to change the world. Both, Musk finally replied, his voice quieter than usual. It's about winning for the future, but it's also about something else. It's about making sure that when we look back, we see that we didn't just exist, we created something that lasts. Just don't lose sight of why you're doing it, the voice warned. The world needs your vision, Elon, but it also needs your humanity. Musk hung up the phone, his mind heavy with the weight of the conversation. The future was still unwritten, and there were more battles ahead. But now, more than ever, he understood that the fight wasn't just about technology, about Mars, or about building an empire. It was about something far more profound, the responsibility of shaping the future for everyone. And in that moment, he knew that the next chapter of his journey was about to begin. The days following his phone conversation had been filled with a profound sense of realization for Elon Musk. For years, he had been laser-focused on the next big challenge, whether it was pushing Tesla's electric vehicle market to new heights or reaching for the stars with SpaceX's Mars ambitions. But the conversation had made him stop, if only for a moment, to truly reflect on what he was trying to achieve beyond the daily grind of innovation. There was always something new to chase: a faster car, a more efficient rocket, an energy system that could change the world. But was that the purpose of it all? The realization began to settle in. He wasn't just building companies, he was trying to build a legacy. But to what end? At Tesla, things were moving faster than ever. The company had just announced a new, more affordable electric vehicle model that was designed to appeal to a broader audience. It wasn't just about selling more cars. It was about making electric transportation accessible to as many people as possible. Musk and his team were racing against time, trying to stay ahead of the new wave of competitors who were launching their own electric vehicles. It was an exhausting period for him. The constant stream of problems to solve, production delays, supply chain issues, new competitors, and regulatory obstacles, felt never-ending. But Musk had never shied away from the tough battles. He was known for his resilience, his ability to push forward in the face of overwhelming odds. The stress was palpable, but so was the adrenaline. Every decision he made could influence the future of the company, of the entire electric vehicle movement. There was no room for failure. At the same time, SpaceX was on the verge of something massive. The Starship program had made tremendous progress, with the first orbital flight test fast approaching. The stakes couldn't have been higher. The world was waiting to see if Musk's vision of a private company sending people to Mars would become a reality. It wasn't just a test of technology, it was a test of his belief in the future, of his ability to challenge the very boundaries of space exploration. But despite the outward success, Musk could feel the pressure mounting. The more ambitious his goals became, the more the weight of responsibility grew. He wasn't just trying to make money or even to be remembered. He was trying to change the world, to make sure humanity had a future beyond Earth. Yet, as he sat in his office late one night, the exhaustion finally caught up with him. He leaned back in his chair, staring at the ceiling, his fingers tapping rhythmically on the armrest. His thoughts were a jumble of competing priorities, and for the first time in a long while, he questioned if he was even capable of managing it all. There was always more to do, another problem to solve, another frontier to push. But who was he really doing this for? Was it about proving something to the world? Or was it simply about challenging himself to accomplish the impossible? Hit subscribe and leave a comment with where you're watching from. This story might just spark a new beginning. What's one thing that always pushes you forward, even when things get tough? The phrase repeated itself in his mind, one he had used countless times, both publicly and privately. What had pushed him forward? Was it the desire for recognition? The hope of building a future for humanity? Or was it something else entirely? Something deeper, perhaps even unknowable? The following week, Musk found himself at a crossroads. He had scheduled a private meeting with his close advisors, including Gwynne Shotwell, the president and COO of SpaceX, and several of Tesla's senior executives. They had been discussing a major decision that would affect both companies. Elon, Gwynne began, looking at him with a knowing expression, I've been looking over the projections for Tesla's next quarter. We're still on track to hit our targets. but the competition is closing in fast. If we don't keep innovating, we risk losing our leadership position. Same goes for SpaceX. We're on the verge of something extraordinary, but there are technical and financial hurdles to overcome before we can actually send people to Mars." She paused, her eyes never leaving his. "The question is, where do you want to put your energy? You can't keep spreading yourself thin across both companies. Eventually, you'll have to choose." Musk looked at her, his mind already turning over the possibilities. He didn't want to let either company falter, but the reality of his situation was becoming increasingly clear. Both Tesla and SpaceX were massive operations, each requiring his full attention and focus. Yet the weight of trying to manage them simultaneously was starting to feel suffocating. "Do you think I'm spread too thin?" Musk asked, his voice quieter than usual. Gwynn nodded, her expression serious. "You're an incredible leader, Elon. You're the reason both of these companies exist. But even you have limits. The mission hasn't changed, but you might need to rethink how you allocate your time and energy." There it was, the unspoken truth. Musk had always thrived on pushing the limits of what was possible. But now, for the first time, it seemed as though his ambitions might be running ahead of his ability to keep up with them. As the meeting ended, Musk went for a walk outside, needing space to think. The sun had just begun to set, casting long shadows over the SpaceX campus. The cool evening breeze ruffled his hair, and for a moment, he let himself breathe deeply. The weight of his responsibilities hung heavy, but there was something about being outside, alone with his thoughts, that made it easier to focus. What was his next move? Would he focus on Tesla's new electric vehicle model, which was now poised to capture a much larger market? Or should he devote himself entirely to SpaceX's Mars mission, a goal that seemed impossible, but that, in his heart, he knew was essential for humanity's future? The thought gnawed at him for hours. The balance between progress and purpose, between reality and ambition, was never easy to strike. But that was what Musk had always thrived on, finding new ways to navigate the impossible. As night fell and he returned to his office, a realization began to form in his mind. The decision ahead of him wasn't just about which company deserved more of his time. It was about the legacy he wanted to leave. Was he content with creating something that merely transformed industries? Or did he want to create something that would change the very course of human history? He had always dreamed of reaching Mars, of becoming part of humanity's first steps beyond Earth. But what if the true future lay in something else entirely? What if the key to humanity's future wasn't just in the stars, but in the way people lived on Earth, the way energy was harnessed, the way the world connected and shared resources? As he sat at his desk, Elon Musk's mind was clearer than it had been in weeks. It wasn't about choosing one company over the other. It was about understanding that the real challenge lay not in dividing his time, but in uniting his vision. Tesla and SpaceX were not separate battles. They were both pieces of a larger whole, a future where humanity thrived on Earth and beyond. The real battle, he realized, wasn't against competitors or even against the laws of physics. It was against the very forces that sought to keep humanity stuck in the past. And that battle, well, that was just beginning. The following weeks were a whirlwind of activity for Elon Musk. The clarity he had found in his quiet moments of reflection was now being translated into action. His energy seemed boundless as he dove headfirst into refining his vision, not just for Tesla and SpaceX, but for humanity's future as a whole. At Tesla, the new vehicle models were on track to revolutionize the market. The affordable electric car had received attention from both consumers and critics alike. Despite the fierce competition, Tesla was maintaining its foothold in the industry. If anything, it was expanding its lead. The team was working tirelessly to ramp up production, and Musk could see it coming together. The advancements in battery technology were about to take Tesla to a whole new level of efficiency, reducing the environmental impact even further. But it wasn't just about building cars anymore. Musk had always believed that electric vehicles were just one part of a larger movement, a movement towards sustainable energy. Solar technology, energy storage solutions, and grid integration had to become just as much a part of the equation. Tesla, he realized, wasn't just a car company. It was the backbone of a new energy system that could, one day, power the entire world. Musk made the decision to take a more hands-on role in Tesla's energy division. He had long been an advocate for renewable energy, but now he was ready to push it to the forefront. The infrastructure, the charging stations, the solar farms, the home batteries needed to be as ubiquitous as gas stations, and he would ensure that they were. At the same time, SpaceX was pressing forward with its goal of sending humans to Mars. The Starship program had made tremendous progress, with the first orbital flight test now only months away. Musk knew that getting this mission off the ground would be a monumental achievement, not just for SpaceX, but for humanity as a whole. But there was a problem. The tech, while impressive, was still in the early stages of development. The Starship prototype was designed to be reusable, which was the key to reducing the cost of space travel. But it needed to undergo several more tests before it could be deemed safe for human flight. As much as Musk wanted to push forward, the reality of the situation was that there were still unknowns. Do we have the funding we need for the next phase? Musk asked Gwynne Shotwell during one of their routine meetings. Gwynne gave him a concerned look. We do, but it's tight. The tests are expensive, and there's still a lot of development that needs to happen before we can guarantee success. We've already had a couple of delays, and the clock is ticking. If we don't make significant progress soon, the competition will catch up. Musk leaned back in his chair, staring at the plans for the next launch. He knew that the stakes were enormous. The entire future of space exploration and colonization rested on the success of SpaceX's Mars mission. But more than that, it was about the survival of humanity. He'd been saying it for years. Earth wasn't enough. Humanity needed to become a multi-planetary species. But he also understood the risks. The reality of making the leap to Mars was daunting, both technologically and financially. The cost of building a self-sustaining colony on another planet was astronomical, and it wasn't clear if the investment would pay off in the short term. But in Musk's mind, it was the only way forward. If humanity was to survive the long term, it needed to be able to weather the unpredictable, whether it was climate change, war, or natural disasters. A backup plan on Mars was the only way to guarantee the survival of the species. We're going to need to find more partners, Musk said, his voice firm. This can't just be a SpaceX project anymore. We need the world to get behind this. Governments, other companies, everyone. If we're going to make it happen, we have to do it together. Gwynne nodded. I'll start reaching out to potential partners. If there's one thing I know, it's that you've always had the ability to rally people around a vision. You've just got to keep pushing. Despite the mounting pressure, Musk felt a sense of urgency that was almost intoxicating. There was no time to waste. Every decision, every action, every investment had to be calculated and made with purpose. But as much as he felt the weight of the mission, he also knew that there was a fine line between pushing the boundaries and going too far. As SpaceX and Tesla both reached new heights, there was a risk of spreading himself too thin, of losing sight of the bigger picture. One afternoon, as he stood on the balcony of his Los Angeles home, watching the sun dip below the horizon, he realized that the tipping point was fast approaching. Both companies were reaching critical junctures. The innovations that had driven them forward for years were now coming to fruition. But as they crossed these thresholds, the challenges grew even more daunting. It wasn't just about building products anymore. It was about reshaping entire industries, entire ways of thinking. Musk thought about the future of Tesla. He wasn't just going to be an automaker. He would be an energy provider on a scale never seen before. But how would he ensure the infrastructure followed suit? How could he get the world to adopt these changes at the pace required to meet the global environmental challenges ahead? It wasn't just a matter of Tesla growing, it was a matter of creating a tidal wave of change, one that moved beyond the confines of any one company or even one nation. He also thought about SpaceX. The technology needed to reach Mars wasn't just going to appear overnight. It would take time, effort, and resources. But the problem wasn't just technical, it was financial. Building a sustainable colony on another planet would require massive funding, collaboration, and innovation from all corners of the world. SpaceX could do it, but only with a massive push from investors, governments, and the public. Musk's thoughts were interrupted when his phone buzzed. It was a message from his team at SpaceX, alerting him to a development in the Starship program. There had been a breakthrough in fuel efficiency, one that could potentially cut the cost of travel to Mars by 30%. It was exactly the kind of innovation that SpaceX needed, and it gave him a renewed sense of hope. As he read through the message, a thought occurred to him, one that seemed almost too simple but carried tremendous weight. If they could make space travel affordable and sustainable, they could make Mars a reality. The vision of a multi-planetary species wasn't just about rockets and fuel. It was about making it accessible to the world. With that, he knew exactly what needed to be done next. SpaceX needed to go global, not just in the sense of reaching more customers, but in terms of making space accessible to everyone. Partnerships, investments, government collaboration. The world would have to unite, just like it had for past space missions, if humanity was to step beyond its earthly limitations. The tipping point was here. Musk felt the urgency pulse in his chest. The future of Tesla and SpaceX, and the future of humanity, all depended on the decisions he made in the coming months. As the sun rose over SpaceX's testing facility in Boca Chica, Texas, Elon Musk was already awake, pacing across the floor of his temporary office. He had been restless for days now, unable to shake the thought of the next big step for humanity, Mars. The breakthrough in fuel efficiency for Starship had been an important milestone, but it was only one piece of the puzzle. There were so many more components, technical and logistical, to be worked out. His eyes lingered on the blueprints spread across his desk, sketches of the Starship design layered with notes and equations in his own handwriting. Each page represented an immense challenge, and yet, Musk had never been more certain that the path to Mars was not just possible, but inevitable. The biggest hurdle wasn't necessarily the tech. He had the world's best engineers working on it. It was convincing the world that this dream was worth pursuing, convincing governments, investors, and even ordinary people that the future of humanity lay in the stars. Musk was used to fighting battles. He had fought the naysayers when Tesla's electric cars were considered impractical, when critics said SpaceX's reusable rockets would never work. But this felt different. The stakes were higher, and the battle was no longer just against technological limitations. It was against time itself. He called an impromptu meeting with Gwynne Shotwell and the rest of the SpaceX leadership team. It was time for a change in strategy, he thought, one that would involve not just improving the technology, but engaging the world in this mission. Gwynne, what's our next move? Musk asked, his tone unusually direct. I think we're on the right track, but we need to shift our focus, she said, flipping through her notes. We've done an incredible job developing the technology, but we're running out of runway. We need more backing from government agencies, more investors, and we need to put the narrative out there that this is not just a SpaceX mission, it's a human mission. Musk nodded. That was exactly what he had been thinking. We've done the impossible before. Now, it's time to rally the world around this mission. If we're going to put a sustainable human presence on Mars, it has to be something everyone believes in. This can't just be SpaceX's dream. It has to be the world's dream. Back at Tesla, the energy division had begun to take shape in ways Musk hadn't anticipated. The momentum from their electric vehicles was now extending into solar and energy storage solutions at a pace that had surprised even him. New partnerships were forming faster than he could have imagined, with multiple countries beginning to show serious interest in Tesla's vision of a sustainable energy grid. Energy is the key, Musk often reminded his team. If we're going to solve climate change, we need to make sustainable energy the norm. It has to be as accessible as gasoline. The concept of a global energy infrastructure was ambitious, perhaps too ambitious for some, but it was becoming more and more apparent that Tesla wasn't simply a car company anymore. Musk was building the framework for the world's future energy system. Solar roofs, Powerwall home batteries, and electric vehicle charging stations were just the beginning. The real vision was far more expansive, a planet powered by renewable energy without dependence on fossil fuels. But with the growth of Tesla came the pressure to maintain that growth. Competitors were catching up, and despite the breakthroughs in battery technology, it was clear that other automakers were investing heavily in electric vehicles. Musk needed to ensure that Tesla didn't just keep pace, but that it continued to lead the charge. The challenge at Tesla now wasn't just about innovation. It was about scaling. Scaling rapidly enough to meet global demand while maintaining the quality and excellence Tesla was known for. Musk had always believed that if a company's mission was big enough, It could attract the right people and resources to overcome any obstacle. But even Musk knew that no company could operate at maximum efficiency without facing significant hurdles. As SpaceX and Tesla continued to grow, Musk faced the hard truth that there was no clear answer to the challenge of balancing his ambitions. The pressure to maintain momentum in both companies was overwhelming, and the need to keep everything moving forward was becoming more and more taxing on him personally. He found solace in the quiet moments when he could disconnect from the noise. Late one night, he stood on the balcony of his home in Los Angeles, gazing at the stars above, pondering his next move. It had been years since he had taken a step back to really think about his personal life and how it fit into his larger goals. The stakes of his ambitions were so high that everything else seemed secondary. His family, his relationships, even his health. The toll was beginning to show. Musk had always prided himself on his ability to work 100-hour weeks, to push through exhaustion and stress with sheer willpower. But now, for the first time, he started questioning whether that was sustainable. Was his drive worth it if it meant sacrificing everything else? Hit subscribe and leave a comment with where you're watching from. This story might just spark a new beginning. What's one thing that always pushes you forward, even when things get tough? The familiar phrase echoed in his mind, almost ironically. The truth was, Musk had spent so much time pushing forward, he had never really stopped to consider the price. The next day, Musk met with his closest advisors. He didn't need to say much. They could all see the weight on his shoulders. Elon, Gwyn began. You've always been known for your ability to take on the impossible, but we all know you're not invincible. You can't do this alone. Musk looked at her, his expression unreadable. I know. I've been thinking about that a lot lately. The thing is, I can't turn back. We're so close to achieving something that will change everything. But I need help. More help, from people who believe in this mission as much as I do. Gwyn's face softened. We're with you, Elon. But remember, this isn't just about the tech. This is about building a movement, one that transcends any company or individual. If we're going to make Mars a reality, we need to make it a mission for all of humanity. Musk sat back, processing the words. He had always seen himself as a singular force, a visionary who could lead the way. But as he looked around at his team, his friends, his colleagues, he realized the truth. This wasn't just his fight anymore. It never had been. Later that day, Musk gathered his leadership teams from both Tesla and SpaceX for a critical meeting. His vision for both companies was bigger than any one person, bigger than any one organization. It was time to act, to bring the world together in a way that had never been done before. It's not about building cars or rockets, he said, his voice steady and clear. It's about building a future where humanity thrives, on Earth and beyond. And that starts with us, together. The world needs to see this as a collective effort, a movement, not just mine, but ours. And with that, the next phase of his journey began. The unseen battle for humanity's future, on Earth and Mars, was no longer a battle that Musk would fight alone. The days following Elon Musk's impassioned speech to his teams felt like a turning point, both for SpaceX and Tesla. It wasn't just about the groundbreaking technologies anymore, or even about pushing the limits of innovation. The true challenge now lay in uniting people behind these companies' missions. Musk was realizing that his legacy and the future of humanity depended just as much on the ability to inspire and mobilize others as it did on the technological feats they were achieving. Musk had always been a dreamer, but now, more than ever, he needed to become a builder of movements. As the week went on, he began reaching out to leaders from other industries, investors, and even activists who were deeply passionate about the future of sustainable energy and space exploration. He started to realize that while Tesla and SpaceX had made major strides in their respective fields, their full potential would only be unlocked when the world at large bought into the vision. The first few calls were difficult. Some of the people Musk reached out to were skeptical. After all, the world wasn't exactly united when it came to pushing for Mars exploration or a sustainable energy future. Many countries were still heavily invested in fossil fuels, and space exploration had always been a niche endeavor, something reserved for the wealthy few or for national governments with massive budgets. But Musk was relentless. The same persistence that had propelled him through years of hardship with Tesla's electric vehicles and SpaceX's rockets now found its purpose in something even greater: shifting the public narrative. "I need your help," Musk told one of his first major investors, a venture capitalist who had seen the rise of Tesla and understood the potential of SpaceX. "It's not enough to innovate anymore. We need the world to see this as more than just technology. We need them to see it as a movement. We need to make Mars a possibility for everyone." The venture capitalist was silent for a moment, processing the gravity of Musk's words. "You're asking for more than just money," the investor said finally. "You're asking for an entire shift in thinking." "That's exactly what I'm asking for," Musk replied. "A shift in thinking. This isn't just about space and energy. It's about the survival of humanity. It's about making sure that we have a future." Over the next few months, Musk began making real progress in his mission to shift global perspectives. He pulled together an unlikely coalition of tech innovators, environmental advocates, and even climate change skeptics who began to see the practical value in pushing for a future that incorporated sustainable energy solutions and a backup plan for humanity on Mars. As the world slowly warmed to the idea of a multiplanetary species, Musk found himself leading a new kind of charge, a charge that didn't just involve engineering, but diplomacy, persuasion, and vision building. For the first time in his career, he felt like he wasn't just working toward technological solutions. He was shaping a global conversation. But the challenge was far from over. The media had always been a fickle ally. While some outlets praised Musk's ambition, others took a more cynical approach. A large portion of the press continued to focus on his ambitious, often risky decisions. The critiques had become louder, and the pressure was building, especially with Musk now more involved in the public-facing side of the business. One particular headline from a major news outlet caught his eye: "Elon Musk's dream of Mars, the billionaire's pipe dream, or the future of humanity." It stung. He had come to expect this type of skepticism, but it didn't make it any easier to endure. The battle for global support would be just as much about his ability to weather these attacks as it would be about his ability to convince the world that SpaceX's Mars mission was not just some distant fantasy. He quickly fired off an email to his team at SpaceX, expressing the urgency of remaining focused on their mission. They had to continue pushing forward, no matter what the headlines said. "Gwen, we need to double down on Starship testing," Musk said in a meeting with her the next day. "The more successful tests we conduct, the more we prove that this isn't a pipe dream. It's happening. We need to show the world that we're serious." Gwen nodded in agreement. "We're ready to proceed with the next phase, but we need to ensure that everything is in place. The data we've collected on previous launches has given us some critical insights, but now we need to move beyond that and show tangible, measurable progress." Musk's eyes narrowed. "That's what I want, tangible progress. The more we demonstrate that we can make Mars a reality, the harder it will be for people to dismiss it." They spent the next few hours going over the details of the upcoming test flights and the data that would need to be shared with the world. Musk was relentless. The pressure to make Starship's success undeniable was mounting. If they could pull off the next set of successful launches, it would silence many of the doubters once and for all. Meanwhile, Tesla was experiencing its own set of growing pains. The push for energy solutions, particularly solar technology, was taking off at a rapid pace. Solar roof installations were being deployed more frequently, and the demand for Powerwall home batteries was skyrocketing. But as Tesla's role in the global energy sector expanded, so did the challenges. The competition from other clean energy providers was intensifying. Some were starting to catch up, while others were trying to bypass Tesla's solar solutions entirely, focusing on their own technologies to take the lead in the sustainable energy race. Tesla can't just lead in the EV space, Musk would often remind his team. "We need to own the entire energy ecosystem. Solar, storage, and transportation. Everything needs to be integrated into one seamless system." To do that, however, would require a leap in manufacturing capabilities, and the factory expansions and technological upgrades Musk envisioned for Tesla would come at a massive cost. It was a delicate balancing act. He couldn't afford delays, nor could he let his enthusiasm for one project undermine the progress of the other. As the success of SpaceX's latest test flight reverberated across the media, Musk was met with a new wave of public attention. The initial skepticism about his Mars ambitions had not disappeared entirely, but the tides were shifting. Success after success was beginning to chip away at the doubters. There was no more room for cynicism when it came to SpaceX's technological capabilities. The world was starting to believe in the possibility of a manned mission to Mars. But Musk knew that technological achievement alone wouldn't be enough to convince the world. It wasn't just about building rockets and sending humans to space. It was about creating a future that everyone could share in. A future where humanity's existence was not limited to Earth but extended to the stars. The phone call from NASA came on a Wednesday morning. Musk had already spent hours on his usual barrage of emails, meetings, and calls when his assistant informed him that a representative from the agency was on the line. "Elon, this is Administrator Bill Nelson from NASA," the voice on the other end of the phone said. "We've been following SpaceX's progress closely, and we want to talk about potential collaborations." Musk leaned back in his chair, intrigued but cautious. NASA had always been a key player in the space industry, and while SpaceX had grown to rival it in many ways, collaboration with such an influential organization could prove invaluable. "Go ahead," Musk said, his voice calm but attentive. "We've seen the progress with Starship, and we're impressed. The potential for collaboration is high, especially with the Artemis program and the goal of getting humans back on the moon. There are opportunities here for SpaceX to be a key partner moving forward, not just for Mars, but for broader space exploration." Musk took a moment to process this. He knew that SpaceX and NASA had always operated on parallel tracks, but this was an opportunity to create something greater, something that could propel humanity into the next era of space exploration. "I think it makes sense," Musk replied, the wheels in his mind already turning. "I've always said that humanity's future doesn't belong to one company or country. We need to unite the world behind this vision. If we can work together, we might just be able to accelerate our timeline." NASA's proposal wasn't just about moon missions or Mars aspirations. It was about building a unified framework for space exploration, one that involved international cooperation, private sector involvement, and a shared sense of urgency. NASA wanted SpaceX to be the leader in reusable spacecraft and lunar landers, while NASA would contribute research, infrastructure, and funding. The conversation quickly turned into a formal agreement. SpaceX's partnership with NASA would be a cornerstone of the United States' plans for Mars and beyond, and Musk knew that this collaboration could set the stage for a global effort to push humanity further than ever before. But Musk's role wasn't just to support NASA's vision, it was to lead. And leading meant that SpaceX had to be at the forefront, pushing the envelope in ways that no one had ever dared to before. Mars wasn't a question of if, it was a question of when. Across the globe, Tesla's role as a leader in sustainable energy was growing. The solar revolution was taking shape, with more and more countries committing to renewable energy goals. Yet, the fight was far from over. Tesla faced challenges not only from competitors, but from entrenched political interests. Fossil fuel industries were pushing back, lobbying governments to continue their reliance on carbon-based energy sources. At the same time, there were increasing calls for more transparency and regulation around the sustainability of Tesla's operations, particularly regarding the sourcing of materials for their batteries and solar panels. Musk had never been one to shy away from challenges, but the mounting pressure to maintain Tesla's market dominance was becoming overwhelming. "The world's watching us," Musk told his Tesla executives in a late-night meeting. "We need to stay ahead of the competition, and that means leading on both the product and ethical fronts. We can't afford any slip-ups." He knew that public opinion and government regulation would play a critical role in shaping Tesla's future. The next few years would be about proving that sustainable energy wasn't just a niche, it was the future, and Tesla would be at the heart of it. Despite the mounting pressure, Musk was energized by the possibilities ahead. The partnership with NASA, the rapid growth of Tesla's energy solutions, and the progress of SpaceX's Mars mission were all pieces of a much larger puzzle. Yet, he couldn't help but feel a sense of isolation, especially as he navigated the complex political, financial, and ethical hurdles that came with being a leader in both the space and energy industries. He was no longer the young entrepreneur who built a small electric car company in his garage. He was a global figure, tasked with solving problems that affected the future of the entire planet. And sometimes, it felt like the weight of the world was on his shoulders. Late one evening, After a particularly exhausting round of meetings, Musk found himself on the balcony of his home in Los Angeles, gazing up at the stars. The vastness of the night sky seemed to put everything into perspective. Despite the struggles, the doubts, and the endless obstacles, the mission was clear. The future is not just something we imagine, he whispered to himself. It's something we create. In the coming months, Musk's vision for both Tesla and SpaceX began to take shape in unexpected ways. SpaceX's collaboration with NASA solidified the path forward for Mars exploration, while Tesla's push for a global energy transition gained momentum with new partners and governments getting on board. As SpaceX prepared for its next round of Starship launches, the team's excitement was palpable. They were on the verge of something huge. A successful launch wouldn't just solidify SpaceX's position as the leading private space company, it would set the stage for humanity's greatest adventure, colonizing Mars. But for Musk, the stakes were much higher. This wasn't just about building rockets or selling electric cars. It was about something far more profound. It was about securing humanity's place in the universe. And with that, he knew that the road ahead would be filled with even more challenges. But he was ready. Because the dream of Mars and a sustainable future for Earth was more than just a personal ambition. It was a mission that could change the course of history. Hit subscribe and leave a comment with where you're watching from. This story might just spark a new beginning. Do you think humanity is ready for the challenge of living on Mars? Or is it just a dream? Elon Musk smiled to himself, knowing that the journey was just beginning. The partnership between SpaceX and NASA had begun to turn heads across the globe. For years, space exploration had been a governmental domain, but now the private sector was firmly entrenched, leading the charge into uncharted territory. The collaboration between SpaceX and NASA was a seismic shift in the industry, one that would set the stage for what was to come. Elon Musk's role as the visionary behind this change was no longer a topic of debate. SpaceX had proven its worth time and again, and now, with NASA's backing, Musk had the resources and platform to push even harder toward his ultimate goal, making life multiplanetary. Mars wasn't just a dream anymore. It was becoming a reality. The next few months were a whirlwind of activity. Starship's test launches were becoming more frequent, and each one was more successful than the last. The stakes were higher than ever, and Musk's obsession with precision and perfection had reached a fever pitch. SpaceX's engineers worked around the clock, testing, recalibrating, and pushing the boundaries of what was possible. Musk knew that it was only a matter of time before they would need to launch the first crewed mission to Mars. That would be the true test, the moment that would cement SpaceX's legacy as the leader in space exploration. But even as the launches were becoming routine, Musk felt the pressure mounting. Every failure is a lesson, but we don't have time for too many failures, Musk would often tell his team. We need to keep pushing the envelope, but we also need to be smart. On the other side of the coin, Tesla's role in the energy revolution was growing at an equally impressive rate. As more countries signed on to renewable energy commitments, the demand for Tesla's solar products skyrocketed. Power walls were being installed in homes across the world, and solar roofs were becoming an increasingly common sight on rooftops. But Musk wasn't satisfied with merely being a leading player in the energy space. He wanted to transform the entire global energy infrastructure. The challenges Tesla faced were becoming more complex. Governments were beginning to put pressure on the company to scale faster and more efficiently. While the clean energy movement was gaining momentum, fossil fuel interests weren't going down without a fight. Politicians who had once supported Tesla were now facing enormous pressure from lobbying groups, and the pace at which Tesla could scale was beginning to feel unsustainable. "I know the scale is huge," Musk said during a meeting with his leadership team, "but we're past the point of no return. If we don't push harder now, we risk losing this moment. The world is finally ready to switch to renewable energy, but it won't wait for us." Tesla's path to domination in the energy sector wasn't going to be easy. To make a real difference, Musk knew that he would need to navigate through a web of political, economic, and logistical challenges. But the clock was ticking. Climate change wasn't waiting for anyone, and the window for global change was rapidly shrinking. One day, Musk received an unexpected invitation. A major conference of world leaders, environmentalists, and tech innovators was being held in New York City. The event was meant to discuss the future of renewable energy and the importance of sustainable practices in the fight against climate change. The invitation wasn't just a formality. Musk had been asked to keynote the event. It was a moment he had been preparing for his entire career. Musk knew that this conference could be the turning point not only for Tesla but for the entire planet. This was his chance to make the case that the future of energy lay not just in wind and solar power but in a complete, integrated system, one that Tesla was uniquely positioned to deliver. The conference hall in New York was packed, and as Musk took the stage, he could feel the weight of the moment. The audience included leaders of some of the world's largest nations, CEOs from competing companies, and environmental activists who had fought for years to make climate change a global priority. He began his speech with a simple yet powerful statement: "We are at a crossroads. The future of our planet depends on the choices we make right now." He went on to explain how Tesla's mission was never just about making electric cars. It was about creating a sustainable future for all of humanity. Solar power, energy storage, and electric vehicles were the building blocks of a new energy system. A system that would be both environmentally responsible and economically viable. Musk's words resonated deeply with the crowd. He spoke passionately about the need for a global shift away from fossil fuels, the need for governments to act decisively, and the need for businesses to step up and lead. The audience was silent as Musk outlined a vision for the future, one where renewable energy powered every aspect of life, from homes to businesses to entire cities. By the end of his speech, the room was electric. People weren't just impressed, they were inspired. And for the first time in years, Musk began to feel like the world was finally waking up to the urgency of the situation. However, as much as Musk wanted to feel elated by the overwhelming response, he couldn't shake the growing sense of unease in the pit of his stomach. The road ahead wasn't going to be easy, and the world's attention, though motivating, only made the stakes higher. Every move he made, every decision he took, was scrutinized more than ever before. And with that level of scrutiny came an increasing pressure to succeed. He couldn't afford to fail, not with Mars, not with the global energy transition, not with Tesla. The entire world was watching, waiting to see if his vision could become a reality. A week after the conference, a series of important meetings took place between Tesla's senior leadership and key government officials. The conversations were tense, as representatives from various nations discussed the practicalities of implementing large-scale renewable energy projects. Musk had hoped for more cooperation, more urgency. But he knew the world wasn't always quick to act. "We can't wait for governments to get their act together," Musk said bluntly to Gwynne Shotwell, who had joined him in the meetings. "If we do, we risk losing momentum. We need to move faster, and we need to take risks." The challenge of implementing clean energy solutions on a global scale wasn't just about technology. It was about politics, bureaucracy, and entrenched interests. Every step forward was met with resistance, whether it was regulatory hurdles or the financial muscle of fossil fuel corporations. Despite the opposition, Musk remained determined. The next big step for Tesla would be scaling its energy grid solutions. Tesla's technology wasn't just about electric cars and solar panels. It was about reimagining how energy was produced, stored, and distributed across the globe. Despite the tension of the recent political meetings, Musk remained unshaken. He knew that to make any lasting change, he had to take bold actions. The problem wasn't about lack of progress. It was about the speed at which progress could be scaled. Tesla and SpaceX were now global leaders, but even with all the resources at his disposal, the world's largest problems were daunting. The timeline for a sustainable energy future and a manned mission to Mars was aggressive. Every day felt like a race against time. Tesla's energy solutions were poised for explosive growth, but the barriers to scaling them weren't just technical, they were regulatory. Musk's team had been meeting with governments around the world to push forward with energy infrastructure projects. The goal wasn't just to sell cars or batteries. It was about changing the entire energy ecosystem. It was about creating a grid that could power entire nations with renewable sources. "Gwynne, I need more from the energy side. We need to think bigger. Global grid-level systems, not just home-level installations," Musk said during a meeting in the Tesla conference room. Gwynne Shotwell nodded, understanding the gravity of the request. "We're working on it," she said. "We've got large-scale installations in the pipeline, but we need more investment in energy storage solutions." The solar production is there. But without the grid tech to make use of it at the scale we need, we'll stall out. Elon's eyes were fixed on the whiteboard in front of them, filled with equations and sketches of potential energy projects. It was clear to him that Tesla couldn't just remain an auto manufacturer or a niche energy player. It had to become the standard. It had to be the architecture for a new world. The pressure from competing solar and battery manufacturers was fierce, but Musk wasn't just concerned about competition. He was worried about the sense of urgency in the climate crisis. As countries scrambled to meet their emissions targets, he knew that the success of Tesla's solar projects was going to be essential to solving the global energy problem. There was no room for delay. We need a moonshot here. Something big. I want to announce a 10-year, multi-billion-dollar plan to integrate solar, battery storage, and grid systems into entire countries. We'll start with smaller regions, but we go big. By the time the next week rolled around, Musk's ambitious energy vision had attracted the attention of some of the biggest players in both government and business. Several global leaders contacted Tesla to discuss a potential partnership for scaling energy storage and distribution on a national level. But even as these conversations unfolded, Musk remained preoccupied with SpaceX's upcoming test launches. The timing of the Mars mission was never far from his mind. His belief in the importance of SpaceX's role in humanity's future drove him to push his team beyond their limits. Starship's next launch was set to be a pivotal moment, a test of SpaceX's capacity to send the first large payload into orbit with a reusable rocket. Success meant they were one step closer to making Mars a reality. On the day of the test, Musk stood in the control room with Gwynne and the SpaceX team. The air was thick with anticipation. This launch would prove that SpaceX's system for transporting large payloads, crucial for Mars missions, was capable of handling the heavy lift required for long-duration space travel. As the countdown ticked down, Musk's mind raced. The success of this test would not only validate years of work, but could also mark a new era for space exploration and for humanity's push toward becoming a multiplanetary species. 10, 9, 8. The voice over the loudspeaker echoed. Musk's fingers tapped on the armrest of his chair, a nervous energy running through him. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. The rocket blasted off into the sky, and a collective cheer erupted from the SpaceX team. It was perfect. Everything went as planned. The rocket's trajectory was flawless, and the data they received confirmed that the payload was successfully deployed. They had done it. Another monumental milestone in the journey to Mars. The celebration was brief. Musk was already thinking about the next step, the much more difficult challenge of sending humans to space. The entire project was a monumental undertaking, but Musk's confidence was unwavering. The success of the test launch had proven that the infrastructure was ready. Now, they needed to prepare astronauts for the journey, and that meant working closely with NASA. As SpaceX continued its rocket development, Tesla had its own hurdles to jump. Scaling the energy infrastructure was not only a technical challenge, but also a political one. Musk's desire to push the boundaries of what was possible on Earth sometimes clashed with the limitations and bureaucratic hurdles imposed by governments and established industries. "I've been dealing with these delays for years," Musk said, frustration evident in his voice during another strategy meeting at Tesla. "We can't wait for the world to catch up. We have to make this happen ourselves. Tesla's technology is the future of energy, and the world has to realize that." "We've got the solar and storage systems," Gwynne replied, "but the grid integrations are still stuck in policy debates. Governments are starting to realize the potential, but they're bogged down by regulations. We need to push the agenda faster." Musk's gaze turned steely. "I'll make sure we get this done. If we have to work outside the system, we'll do it. But we're not slowing down." As the year progressed, Tesla's efforts to scale were moving forward, and SpaceX's space missions were gaining momentum. But the breakthrough Musk was hoping for wasn't just about success on the launch pad. It was about changing the conversation around global cooperation for a sustainable future. His work on Earth was just as crucial as the work in space. Musk's next step was clear: uniting the world to not only transition to renewable energy, but to rally behind a larger cause, SpaceX's Mars mission. He understood that only by creating a shared vision of humanity's future could he inspire people to work together. One day, Musk was on a video call with the heads of several major corporations. His pitch was simple, but its implications were massive. Collaboration, rather than competition, was the only way forward. The future, he began, isn't about one company succeeding. It's about all of us succeeding together. We need to push for policy changes. We need to push for technological breakthroughs. And most of all, we need to be ready for the next era of space exploration. The success of SpaceX and Tesla are just parts of a much larger whole. He spoke for hours, pushing for not just technological innovation but a cultural shift, a movement of businesses, governments, and individuals working toward a shared vision. By the end of the call, there was a sense of clarity and shared purpose. These companies were not just competitors. They were fellow travelers on the road to the future. As the call ended, Musk leaned back in his chair, looking out the window at the setting sun. For the first time in a while, he felt a deep sense of satisfaction. He wasn't just building rockets or electric cars. He was building a future that was no longer dependent on the constraints of the present. He turned to his team at SpaceX and Tesla, who were waiting for him in the next room. "We've got a long road ahead, but we're on the right path. Let's finish what we started." And with that, Musk knew that the next chapter in the journey toward Mars and a sustainable Earth had begun. It had been months of grueling work for both SpaceX and Tesla. Musk had spent sleepless nights plotting out every detail, pushing himself and his teams to their limits. The stakes were as high as they'd ever been. The Mars mission was moving forward, and the global energy transition was starting to gain the momentum he'd hoped for. But the pressure was beginning to show, and Musk knew it. The overwhelming scope of his ambitions had started to wear on him. SpaceX was testing new rockets almost weekly, and Tesla's energy storage systems were being installed in cities across the globe. But the pace of progress was frenetic, and Musk couldn't shake the feeling that there wasn't enough time. He had set out to revolutionize not one, but two of the most critical industries of our time: space exploration and energy. And despite the successes, he was becoming increasingly aware that the world was changing more slowly than he needed it to. In the weeks following the major energy conference, Musk found himself navigating through new obstacles. Governments were now more interested in his vision, but they still weren't acting with the urgency that he demanded. Meetings with global leaders had become frustrating. Musk's goal was simple: create an interconnected renewable energy grid that spanned countries, regions, and eventually the entire planet. But bureaucracy, red tape, and conflicting interests were proving to be far greater barriers than he had anticipated. "Every meeting is the same," Musk said, pacing around a boardroom table filled with Tesla's top executives. "Everyone agrees that climate change is a real threat. But when it comes to action, they hesitate. They want studies, reports, analyses. They want time to evaluate. Well, time is something we don't have." His frustration was palpable. While Tesla and SpaceX continued to build impressive products, the world's governments and corporations were still mired in indecision. "I can't keep waiting around for them to act," Musk said, stopping to look directly at Gwynne Shotwell. "Tesla needs to start pushing its own agenda. We can't afford to play by their rules anymore." In the coming days, Musk began reaching out to leaders in the energy industry and beyond. He was determined to build a coalition of like-minded companies and leaders who understood the urgency of the situation and were willing to make radical moves. He would no longer wait for governments to take the lead. He would force their hand. Tesla's growing presence in the renewable energy space wasn't just about selling products. It was about creating a movement. Musk knew that if he could align enough companies to adopt similar technologies, he could set a standard for how the world would transition to clean energy. This wasn't just about a business. It was about the future of humanity. While Tesla's mission was gaining steam, SpaceX was making its own strides. The Starship program was progressing faster than Musk had hoped. The latest test flights were proving the system could transport cargo to Mars, and the data collected had reinforced Musk's belief that sending humans to the Red Planet wasn't just feasible, it was imminent. But even with all of the progress, the human spaceflight program had its own set of challenges. With NASA's support, SpaceX was working to develop the systems needed for long-duration space travel, but Musk knew that there were still significant hurdles ahead. The cost, the risks, and the uncertainty of sending humans to Mars were immense. It wasn't just about the technology, it was about ensuring the safety of astronauts who would eventually take that journey. As preparations for SpaceX's Mars mission ramped up, Musk had another problem to solve: the human factor. Despite all the technical progress, space travel was still fraught with risks. And for Musk, the human aspect was just as important as the rocket science. He began working closely with his team of engineers and scientists to develop a system that could minimize risks for astronauts, especially during long space voyages. Musk's obsession with the safety of his crew had led him to push the limits of what was possible. He was determined to make sure that the journey to Mars would be as safe as possible. And while that meant more testing, more analysis, and more engineering, he knew that this was the only way to ensure the success of the mission. It was during one of these late-night sessions that Musk had an epiphany. If he was truly going to build a sustainable future for humanity, he couldn't afford to leave anything to chance. He needed to push every technological boundary, every resource, and every innovation to its limit. While Musk's energy vision and Mars ambitions were at the forefront, the realities of the business world were always present. Tesla's stock price had become a constant topic of conversation in boardrooms and newsrooms alike. The company was growing exponentially, but it wasn't immune to volatility. And as Musk's energy and space pursuits gained global attention, Wall Street scrutiny intensified. Shareholder pressure was growing. Tesla's investors wanted to see returns, fast. But Musk's long-term vision didn't necessarily align with the short-term demands of Wall Street. And the tension between his grand ambitions and the expectations of his shareholders was beginning to take its toll. "People don't understand," Musk said, addressing his team in a private meeting. "They don't see the bigger picture. The work we're doing isn't about today. It's about tomorrow. And if we don't make the investments now, we risk losing everything." Gwynne Shotwell, always the pragmatist, responded, "I get it, Elon. But we also have to be careful. If we push too hard, too fast, it could backfire. We need a strategy that balances our growth and sustainability." But Musk wasn't interested in taking things slow. He had spent years waiting. And now, the world was finally ready to listen. As SpaceX's rockets continued to rise into the sky and Tesla's battery systems began to power cities, Musk remained fixated on the future. The world's attention was on him now, and he knew that the spotlight would only grow brighter. But with that attention came the pressure to succeed, not just for his companies, but for the planet. The closer he got to his goal, the more he realized that it wasn't just about achieving success. It was about changing the trajectory of humanity itself. The future of Earth, of Mars, and of space exploration was tied to his vision. And while it was exhilarating, it was also terrifying. Musk had always been known for his ability to take risks. But now, as the stakes grew higher, he faced his greatest challenge yet: balancing the ambition to save the planet with the weight of making space exploration a reality. The road to Mars wasn't just about rockets and technology, it was about the survival of humanity. And as Musk watched the Starship ascend into the night sky, he knew that the tipping point was near. The pressure on Elon Musk was mounting. While his ambitions for both Tesla and SpaceX were soaring to new heights, the weight of managing two companies at once, with their own massive growth trajectories, was starting to take its toll. He could feel the anxiety creeping in, the constant demand for his attention, the endless meetings, the late nights, and the unyielding desire to push both industries forward. But there was something deeper now, something different. Musk knew that he was not just trying to build a legacy anymore. He was attempting to rewrite the very fabric of human progress. One evening, while reviewing a new batch of data on Tesla's battery storage systems, Musk took a rare moment to pause. He was alone in his office, with only the glow of his computer screen to keep him company. For the first time in a long while, he allowed himself to reflect, not just on the work in front of him, but on everything he had done and everything that lay ahead. SpaceX was closer than ever to launching a crewed mission to Mars, and Tesla was on the verge of scaling its renewable energy solutions on a global level. But Musk knew there was a critical moment ahead, a decision that could either set everything into motion or bring it all crashing down. It was a gamble, a massive one, and he was about to take it. "Gwynne, we need to accelerate our efforts. The global energy transition is happening faster than expected, and if we don't move now, others will fill the gap," Musk said the next morning during a call with Tesla's president. "I know," Gwynne replied, her voice steady but tinged with concern. "But Elon, We're pushing every boundary we can. I agree we need to move faster, but we also need to manage the risk. If we don't balance this carefully, we risk overstretching our resources. We need to ensure that Tesla's production isn't compromised while we scale the energy side. Musk took a deep breath. He respected Gwyn's pragmatism, but he also knew that the stakes were too high to wait. I understand, but we can't afford to wait any longer. We're entering the most critical phase in the transition to a sustainable energy future. This is bigger than Tesla, bigger than any of us. We have to make the leap now. The risk wasn't just technical. It was financial. Musk had already invested billions of dollars into Tesla's energy infrastructure and into SpaceX's mission to Mars. But even with his personal fortune and Tesla's success, both companies were still facing significant pressure from investors and markets. Wall Street had a simple message. They wanted short-term profits, not long-term visions. And Musk wasn't willing to compromise. Tesla's stock was volatile, with investors reacting to Musk's increasingly bold moves. But Musk didn't just want short-term financial success. He was playing for the future, the long game. And the future was about radically transforming the way the world consumed energy and the way humanity reached for the stars. Musk's decision was made. He would push forward with the next stage of the Mars mission, sending the first crewed mission into space, and simultaneously, he would double down on the energy transition, using Tesla's innovations to build not just a sustainable grid, but a global infrastructure that could power entire nations. But this dual pursuit of massive goals was risky. Both projects were complex, and the funding required for each was astronomical. Musk would need to secure more capital, faster than he ever had before, and to do that, he'd need to convince investors that he was capable of pulling off what seemed impossible. That was the gamble. Gwyn, I'm going to pitch this idea to some of the biggest investors in the world. The goal is simple. We need more funding to make both Tesla's energy transition and SpaceX's Mars mission a reality. If we succeed, we will reshape the future. If we fail, well, we don't have the luxury of failure, Musk said, his eyes intense with conviction. The next few weeks were a whirlwind. Musk met with venture capitalists, high-net-worth individuals, and private equity firms, pitching the grand vision. A global energy grid powered by renewable sources, and a Mars mission that would serve as a beacon of human ambition. Some of the meetings were successful, while others were met with skepticism. The idea of investing in such enormous projects was daunting, but Musk was relentless. We're at a crossroads, Musk said to one group of investors. The world is depending on us to create the future we've all been talking about for decades. The technology is there. The solutions are ready. The only thing standing in the way is our willingness to act. I can guarantee that if you back us now, we will not only return your investment, we will create the future. The pitch was powerful, but it was more than just about money. Musk wasn't just asking for capital, he was asking for belief. And some investors saw the potential. After weeks of tense negotiations, Musk secured the funding he needed to propel both Tesla and SpaceX forward. It was a win, but it came at a cost. Musk would have to give up more control of his companies, and the pressure to deliver would only intensify. As SpaceX's crewed mission to Mars moved forward, Musk turned his attention back to Tesla. The progress on the energy transition was happening, but not quickly enough. The world needed more, and it needed it now. Tesla was already a leader in electric vehicles, but Musk was determined to take the company into new territory. He wanted Tesla to become a comprehensive energy company, powering homes, cities, and entire nations with solar and battery storage. But with global governments still slow to act, Musk's team had to find ways to bypass the traditional roadblocks. Gwyn, I need you to get creative with this, Musk said during a strategy session. We've got to think outside the box. We need to get governments and industries to buy in. But if we have to go around them, we will. Gwyn's expression softened as she listened to Musk's words. It was clear he was nearing a breaking point, a crossroads where the future of both companies rested on his ability to make the right decision. Meanwhile, Musk's work on SpaceX was entering a critical phase. The crewed Mars mission was nearly ready, and the test flights for Starship were progressing well. Musk knew that this would be the defining moment for humanity's future in space. The stakes couldn't be higher, and the risks couldn't be greater. But the more Musk thought about it, the more he realized something. This wasn't just about technology. This wasn't even just about business. This was about the survival of the human race. If humanity wanted to thrive beyond Earth, it needed to take bold, aggressive steps. And if Musk had to be the one to lead that charge, then he would. The ultimate gamble was underway. Musk had everything to lose and everything to gain. The next few years would determine whether his vision would change the world, or whether his dream of creating a sustainable energy future and reaching Mars would crumble under the weight of the impossible. And as Musk stared out over the sprawling Tesla factory, his thoughts turned to the future. He wasn't just building cars. He wasn't just sending rockets to space. He was building humanity's future, and that was worth any risk. The weeks following Elon Musk's bold decision were a blur of activity. SpaceX was making history, preparing for its first crewed mission to Mars, while Tesla was charging forward with plans to revolutionize the global energy landscape. Yet, despite all the progress, the world around Musk seemed to grow more complex and unpredictable. Every day brought new challenges, regulatory hurdles, skeptical investors, and the ever-growing pressure to deliver results. But Musk had learned long ago that the path to success was rarely smooth. He was used to the uncertainty. In fact, he thrived on it. The day after securing the necessary funding for both SpaceX's Mars mission and Tesla's energy transition, Musk sat alone in his office, staring at the digital screens in front of him. On one side, charts and projections for Tesla's solar energy projects. On the other, a countdown timer to the upcoming launch of the Starship, the ship that would carry humans to Mars. He took a deep breath, knowing the stakes were higher than ever. For years, he had believed that space exploration was humanity's destiny, and now that dream was becoming a reality. But the pressure was overwhelming. SpaceX had come so far, yet the challenges were greater than anything he had ever faced. He closed his eyes for a moment, imagining the launch of the Starship, the fiery trail cutting across the sky, the astronauts aboard, heading for a new world. But this wasn't just about rockets. It was about something far bigger. Mars was the future, yes, but Musk knew that Earth's future was just as precarious. And the energy transition, while vital, would take longer than he had hoped. Gwynne Shotwell, ever the pragmatist, had been working tirelessly behind the scenes to make sure that both Tesla and SpaceX could stay on course. The financial support from investors was crucial, but so was the operational efficiency that kept Tesla's electric vehicles on the road and SpaceX's rockets in the air. "Elon, I've been thinking about the timeline for the Mars mission," Gwynne said one morning during a video call. "We're on track with the test flights, but the human factor is going to complicate things. We need to think about life support, radiation exposure, the psychology of long-term space travel. These are the things we can't simulate perfectly on Earth." Musk listened intently, his mind whirring with ideas. "I know, but we've been testing the life support systems for years, and the technology is there. It's not perfect, but we can keep improving it. The real problem is how to make this sustainable long-term. Space travel isn't just about rockets. It's about creating a new world. We have to make Mars habitable, and that means everything from food to energy." Gwynne nodded. "You're right, but we can't underestimate how complex it will be. It's not just the technology. It's the human element. We need the right people, the right team, and the right mindset. We're not just launching rockets. We're launching humanity's next great adventure." As Gwynne spoke, Musk felt a sense of resolve settle over him. It wasn't just about sending rockets into space. It was about survival. Humanity needed a backup plan. Space was that plan, and Mars was the first step. But even as he focused on the future of space exploration, Musk could feel the mounting pressure of the task at hand. Tesla's energy solutions were growing, but the market wasn't responding with the urgency he had hoped for. Governments were still slow to act, and despite his best efforts, the transition to renewable energy was still a slow, uphill battle. Musk's frustration reached its peak one afternoon during a critical meeting with Tesla's energy team. They were discussing the rollout of the next generation of solar roofs and battery storage units, and the numbers weren't adding up. Production was lagging behind expectations, and the cost of scaling was higher than anticipated. "We're running out of time," Musk said, his voice tinged with frustration. "We have the technology, but we're not moving fast enough. Every day we delay, we're losing ground." Gwynne shot him a look. "Elon, We're pushing as hard as we can. But these aren't small issues we're tackling. We're trying to build a global energy infrastructure from the ground up. It's not something you can do overnight. Musk was quiet for a moment, his thoughts racing. He knew Gwyn was right. He knew this wasn't easy. But he also knew that waiting wasn't an option. The clock was ticking, and the future was at stake. I understand, he said finally, but we need to take it up a notch. We need more partnerships, more collaborations. If we can get governments to back us, if we can build the momentum, I know we can make this work. Later that evening, Musk found himself back in his office, the weight of the day pressing down on him. SpaceX and Tesla were growing at an unprecedented rate, but with that growth came even greater responsibility. The road to Mars would be long and perilous, and the road to a sustainable energy future was equally uncertain. As he sat in front of the glowing screens, Musk couldn't help but think about the bigger picture. For all the technical challenges ahead, the future of humanity depended on one thing: perseverance. He had spent his entire career pushing the boundaries of what was possible. And now, with everything on the line, he would need to push even harder. The next few months were a blur of non-stop action. SpaceX's Starship was progressing toward its first crewed mission, and the team was working tirelessly to ensure the safety and success of the mission. Meanwhile, Tesla's energy division had made some major breakthroughs in solar technology, and production was finally starting to ramp up. But even as progress was being made, Musk knew that both missions, Mars and energy, were far from guaranteed. As SpaceX prepared for its first human mission to Mars, Musk spent sleepless nights reviewing every detail of the mission. He had poured his heart and soul into this, and failure was not an option. The astronauts would need to rely on everything, from the life support systems to the fuel systems to the mental fortitude required for such a long, perilous journey. This mission was going to test everything SpaceX had built and everything Musk believed in. On the day of the launch, Musk stood at the control center, watching as the Starship stood tall against the backdrop of the early morning sky. The countdown had begun, and the energy in the room was palpable. His heart was racing, but his face was calm. This was it, the moment that could define the future of humanity. But as the countdown neared zero, Musk's thoughts shifted. This was only the beginning. The journey to Mars was just the first step in the grander vision of humanity becoming a multi-planetary species. But before they could take that step, there was another challenge that remained. One that had nothing to do with rockets or technology, but with the will of the people. The moment had arrived. The Starship was perched on the launch pad, its massive frame dwarfing everything around it. Elon Musk stood in the control room, staring at the massive screens before him, his mind racing as the countdown ticked away. He had spent years, decades, building up to this moment, but now that it was here, the reality of what they were about to attempt hit him harder than he expected. This wasn't just a rocket launch. This was history in the making. This was the first human mission to Mars. But for Musk, it was more than that. This wasn't just a mission to another planet. It was humanity's future. The fate of civilization itself was tied to the success of this journey. If they could make it to Mars, they would be one step closer to becoming a multi-planetary species, ensuring the survival of humanity. But if they failed, the consequences were dire. Musk's thoughts were interrupted by Gwyn Shotwell, who walked into the room, her face set with determination. "Elon, everything is ready. The crew is on board. The system checks are complete. We're ready for launch," she said, her voice steady but filled with the same tension that Musk felt. Musk nodded. He knew that the team had done everything possible to prepare for this moment. The systems had been tested, retested, and then tested again. The astronauts were as prepared as anyone could be. But even with all the preparation, there was a risk. There always was. The room fell silent as the countdown reached its final moments. Musk could hear the low hum of the machines around him, and he could feel the intensity of the moment settling in. 10, 9, 8. The seconds seemed to stretch out in front of him, a slow-motion countdown that felt like hours. 7, 6, 5. Musk's breath was steady, but his heart was pounding. This was what he had been working for. This was his vision, the culmination of years of hard work, sacrifice, and risk. 4, 3, 2, 1. Launch. The sound of the rocket engines roaring to life was deafening, and the ground trembled beneath their feet as the starship lifted off, cutting through the sky with a blinding trail of light. Musk's eyes never left the screen in front of him as the rocket soared higher and higher, breaking free from Earth's atmosphere. In that moment, as the starship ascended toward the stars, Musk felt a rush of emotions: exhilaration, relief, and an overwhelming sense of pride. This was what he had always believed in. This was humanity's future. As the mission continued, Musk found himself in a whirlwind of activity. Despite the success of the launch, there was still so much to do. The crew aboard the starship would be in space for months, and Musk had to ensure that everything continued to run smoothly, not just for the mission, but for everything that lay ahead. Tesla's work on renewable energy was progressing, but Musk knew that there was still more to be done. The world was watching. Every decision he made would have lasting consequences, not just for his companies, but for the future of the planet. One evening, Musk sat down with Gwynn to discuss the next phase of Tesla's global expansion. "We've made great progress, but we need to accelerate," Musk said, his voice determined. "The future of energy depends on us moving faster. Solar, battery storage, electric vehicles, we need to get it all out there." Gwynn looked at him with a raised eyebrow. "You're asking for a lot, Elon. Tesla's infrastructure is already stretched thin. We need to be strategic about how we scale." Musk nodded. "I understand the need for strategy, but this isn't just about business. It's about the planet's survival. We have to act now." Gwynn understood his urgency, but she also knew that moving too quickly could cause chaos. As ambitious as Musk was, she knew the balance between pushing the limits and ensuring sustainable growth was fragile. "Elon, I get it, but we have to make sure that we can handle the demand we're creating. We can't just build products. We have to build systems, and those systems need to be resilient. One mistake, and we could set the entire energy transition back years." Musk was silent for a moment, thinking deeply. Gwynn was right, of course. Speed was crucial, but so was execution. Every step needed to be well thought out. And yet, the urgency of the situation gnawed at him. The clock was ticking, and he couldn't afford to waste time. "You're right," Musk said, finally. "Let's make a plan. But let's make it bold. We need to lead, not follow. It's time to show the world what we're capable of." As the months passed, Musk's vision for both SpaceX and Tesla grew clearer. The Starship mission to Mars was progressing smoothly, with regular updates from the astronauts as they made their way to the Red Planet. Meanwhile, Tesla was beginning to roll out its advanced energy solutions on a larger scale, with new partnerships and international expansion. But despite the outward progress, Musk knew that there were challenges ahead, challenges that no one could predict. The global energy market was volatile, and there were always unforeseen obstacles when it came to large-scale space missions. Yet Musk remained undeterred. For him, the stakes were too high to back down. One night, as Musk sat in his office, staring at the glowing map of Mars on his computer screen, he reflected on everything that had led him to this moment. From his early days of dreaming about electric cars to his obsession with space travel, Musk had always been driven by one thing: the desire to make a difference. He knew that the work he was doing would shape the future, not just for his companies, but for humanity as a whole. But he also knew that this future wasn't guaranteed. There were no certainties in space, no guarantees in energy transition. All he could do was push forward, against all odds, and hope that the rest of the world would follow. The moment of truth had arrived. Elon Musk stood in the control center of SpaceX, his eyes fixed on the monitors. The Starship, the culmination of years of work and countless hours of dedication, was now only minutes away from landing on Mars. The crew of astronauts aboard had made it through the harshness of space. Its unyielding silence, the isolation, and the bone-shaking acceleration of the launch. They were about to land on an entirely different world. As the final countdown clock ticked down, Musk felt an odd mixture of emotions. He had been planning for this moment for so long that it almost felt surreal. Everything he had ever dreamed of, electric cars, solar power, Mars colonization, was all converging at this precise instant. The Red Planet, a barren rock only a few decades ago, was about to become a second home for humanity. And he had made it happen. But, as always, there was the looming shadow of uncertainty. The planet was unforgiving, and no one knew exactly what the landing would entail. Every new challenge brought its own risks, and Mars was no exception. If the landing failed, it could delay humanity's chance to become a multiplanetary species. If it succeeded, it would mark the dawn of an entirely new era. Elon, Gwynne Shotwell's voice cut through his thoughts. We're approaching the final descent. Everything is looking good on the screens. Musk nodded, not breaking his gaze from the monitors. The starship was nearing Mars's atmosphere, and the crew was preparing for the dramatic descent. There was no turning back now. His hands were slightly sweaty, but his resolve was steely. "Let's do this," Musk said under his breath. On the screen, the descent was coming into view. The starship was facing Mars's thin atmosphere, and the deceleration burns had begun. The entire room was silent, all eyes on the screen, waiting for the moment the ship's legs would touch Martian soil. The excitement in the control room was palpable, but there was no room for celebration. Not yet. A few tense moments passed, and then the final landing stage began. The crew on board was running through the checklist, making sure every system was functioning perfectly. The starship was skimming the red surface of Mars now, moving slowly but steadily. "Elon, we're almost there," Gwynne said again, her voice betraying the excitement she felt despite her usually composed demeanor. Musk only nodded. In this moment, there was nothing he could do except trust the team. He had placed his faith in them, and now they were executing. This was no longer about business, politics, or even the pursuit of profit. This was about survival, the survival of humanity. The risk was enormous, but so were the rewards. The control room's atmosphere was tense. The lander was now only seconds from making contact. The crew on Mars was about to be the first humans to set foot on another planet. For years, the dream had been impossible, a fantasy that many believed was reserved for science fiction. But now, it was happening. Then, the moment arrived. The starship's landing legs touched down with a soft thud, and the entire control center erupted into cheers and applause. Musk stood motionless for a moment, letting the gravity of what had just happened sink in. The first human beings had touched down on Mars. A feat that had once seemed impossible was now a reality. His heart raced, his mind racing to catch up to the enormity of the achievement. Musk felt a deep sense of pride. This was more than just a successful mission. This was the beginning of something far greater than himself. It was the beginning of humanity's journey to the stars. Mars was only the first step. The true journey had only just begun. As the crew celebrated the historic achievement, Musk stayed in the control room, reflecting on what had led them here. There had been doubts, failures, and setbacks along the way. There were plenty of people who told him it was impossible, who said that he was wasting his time, his money, and his energy. But Musk had always known that failure wasn't an option. He knew that if they succeeded on Mars, the world would never be the same. But he also knew that this wasn't just about Mars. There were far bigger goals ahead. Mars would serve as the proving ground for future missions, and beyond that, there were other worlds to explore. Musk's mind raced with possibilities, with the endless potential of space and what it meant for humanity's future. Meanwhile, Tesla's energy transition was making strides, albeit more slowly than Musk had hoped. While the world cheered the progress of SpaceX, Tesla's mission to revolutionize energy was facing new resistance. Governments were slow to adopt clean energy solutions, and fossil fuel companies had enormous influence in many parts of the world. Musk had always believed that the world would eventually realize the importance of transitioning to renewable energy. But now, with the Mars mission finally a reality, he knew that humanity's fate on Earth depended on this transition. If the planet didn't change course soon, the challenges they faced on Earth would become even more insurmountable. In the following weeks, the excitement of the Mars landing settled into a routine. The crew continued to explore and study the planet, gathering data that would one day help build a sustainable colony. But Musk's mind couldn't settle. He knew that this was only one chapter in the story he had set in motion, but the next steps were just as critical. What would humanity do with the newfound knowledge? How would they adapt to life on another planet? And how would they solve the problems they were facing back on Earth? "Elon," Gwynne interrupted his thoughts one day. "We've got the data from Mars coming in. It's more promising than we thought." This could change everything for the way we approach future colonies. Musk turned to her, his eyes lighting up with a new sense of purpose. This is it. This is how we begin to turn things around. This is the new frontier. He didn't know what the future held, but he was sure of one thing. The journey to Mars was just the beginning. The dust on Mars was still settling, but Elon Musk's mind was already racing ahead to the next big challenge. The landing had been a triumph, undeniably. The world had watched as humanity's first crewed mission touched down on the red planet. However, as the dust settled on Mars, it became clear that the real work had only just begun. This wasn't about one successful mission. It was about laying the groundwork for humanity's survival across planets. Musk stared at the Martian horizon in the distance from his control center, watching as live footage streamed in from the astronauts now working on the surface. He marveled at their progress. The way they were starting to build the first of many outposts that would eventually grow into thriving colonies. For Musk, it was more than just a scientific achievement. It was personal. He had always envisioned the world expanding beyond Earth, and now it was happening. But there was still so much more to do. Tesla was growing, but not at the pace Musk had hoped. The battle for sustainable energy was one of the most difficult he had faced. Despite the technological breakthroughs and groundbreaking solar energy solutions, the world wasn't moving fast enough. Governments were still clinging to outdated power sources, and many industries were slow to transition to green energy. Musk knew he had to keep pushing. Every day he fought the tide of inertia. Every day he fought to keep Tesla on the cutting edge, to push forward and lead the charge in renewable energy. But it was getting harder. Some days, it felt like he was swimming against an unstoppable current. "Elon, we've got to get the production up faster for the solar roofs," Gwen said over a video call. "The demand is there, but our supply chain isn't where it needs to be. We can't scale fast enough if we don't solve these bottlenecks." Musk pinched the bridge of his nose, tired but resolute. "I know, and I'm working on it. But we're up against time, Gwen. If we don't accelerate the energy transition soon, we're going to hit a wall. We're on the clock." The weight of that realization was suffocating. Space exploration was thrilling and full of potential, but the future of humanity on Earth, right now, was just as important, if not more so. The problems on Earth were immediate, while Mars was still a long-term vision. "I get it," Gwen responded. "We'll double down on supply chain optimization, but we need more partners, more buy-in from governments and other companies. It's going to take a collective effort." Musk sat back, pondering. He knew that Tesla couldn't go it alone. The change needed to be global, and that meant working with governments, industries, and even competitors. There had to be a way to create an irresistible wave of progress, a wave that could push humanity to where it needed to go. As the months passed, Musk shifted between his responsibilities at SpaceX and Tesla. Both missions were progressing, but they faced obstacles that no one had predicted. SpaceX's Mars colony was progressing slowly but surely. The crew had successfully set up a research station, and their findings were starting to shed light on how humans could potentially live sustainably on Mars. Musk was already looking toward the next steps: habitats, food production, and long-term sustainability. But on Earth, things were getting more complicated. Tesla's energy solutions were being met with increasing resistance, particularly in countries that were still heavily invested in fossil fuels. Governments seemed hesitant to make the sweeping changes Musk knew were necessary. And yet, there was still hope. The signs were there. The tipping point could still be reached. As the weeks turned into months, Musk found himself more focused than ever on the bigger picture. Humanity's future depended on one key thing: collaboration. The success of the Mars mission was a testament to the power of collective effort. SpaceX, NASA, and countless other collaborators had come together to make the impossible possible. But here on Earth, the same level of collaboration was still lacking. It was frustrating. Musk knew what needed to be done. He knew the technology existed to transform the world. What he didn't know was how to break through the layers of bureaucracy, resistance, and outdated thinking that stood in the way. One evening, Musk sat in his office, staring at the screens before him. Tesla's stock was still high, but it didn't feel like enough. SpaceX was making history, but the real challenge, saving Earth, loomed larger than ever. As he looked at the data on the global energy market, the problem became painfully clear. Fossil fuels still dominated the world. Even with all the advancements in solar, wind, and battery storage, the transition to clean energy was not happening quickly enough. He rubbed his eyes, exhausted from another sleepless night of problem-solving. It was overwhelming, and there were days when he questioned whether it was even possible to achieve the level of change he had set out to make. But then he thought back to the Mars mission. The crew had made it to the Red Planet. They had defied all odds. They had faced challenges no one could predict, but they had persevered. The following day, Musk convened a global summit with energy leaders, industry magnates, and government representatives. He knew it was time to take a bold approach. It was no longer just about innovation and technology. It was about driving change on a global scale. Gentlemen, ladies, we are standing on the precipice of the future, Musk began as he stood at the podium. The future of humanity depends on how quickly we can transition from fossil fuels to renewable energy. The technology is here. We have the solutions. Now, we need action. There was an undeniable sense of urgency in Musk's voice. The room fell silent as everyone around him realized the gravity of the situation. We cannot wait for governments to act on their own, Musk continued. We need to force their hand. We need to show them that renewable energy is not just an option. It's the only viable future for humanity. We need a global energy agreement, one that will unite the world in the effort to combat climate change. The room was filled with murmurs, some skeptical, some hopeful. Musk had thrown down the gauntlet. Now, it was time to see who would rise to the challenge. The future was still uncertain, but Musk had never been more committed to his vision. Mars was just one part of the puzzle. The real mission was saving Earth, and it was going to take every ounce of ingenuity, leadership, and determination Musk had to make it happen. As he walked off the stage, he felt the weight of the world on his shoulders. But he wasn't afraid. In fact, he was more determined than ever. The journey ahead was long, but with every step, humanity was moving closer to its future. The next phase of the mission had begun, and Musk, once again, was leading the way. The summit had been a turning point. Musk knew that pushing the world to embrace renewable energy wouldn't happen overnight, but now he had galvanized the global community. The world's most influential leaders, energy giants, and industry magnates were all in the same room, focused on the same issue. Musk had laid out a bold plan, a global energy agreement to accelerate the shift away from fossil fuels. The challenge was enormous, but for the first time, it felt like the world was waking up to the urgency. After the summit, Musk couldn't help but reflect on the conversations he had had, the passionate speeches he had given. There was a shift in the air. Even the most skeptical voices had begun to show signs of hope. They all knew what was at stake. The technology was ready, the solutions were in front of them, but they needed to act quickly and decisively. Back at Tesla headquarters, Gwynne Shotwell was already strategizing next steps. The response to Musk's summit speech had been overwhelming. Governments were beginning to signal their willingness to participate in renewable energy initiatives. Some were still hesitant, but the global momentum was undeniable. Elon, Gwynne said as she entered his office with a data tablet in hand, we're seeing an uptick in interest from international governments. Some are asking for our help in transitioning to sustainable energy solutions. But we need to move fast. The window for action is closing. Musk nodded. The window is closing, but the window of opportunity is wide open. We have to seize it. We've built the technology. We've shown that it works. Now, it's up to us to lead by example. If we can get governments to invest heavily in this, if we can show the world that the economic benefits far outweigh the costs, we can make it happen. He stood up, his eyes locked on Gwynne's. The intensity in his gaze was unmistakable. It's time to make the world a model for a sustainable future. We can't just talk about it anymore. We need to make this shift real. We need it now. Gwynne agreed, a sense of determination settling in her posture. Then let's make it happen, Elon. We've got the resources. We've got the expertise. We've just got to push for more. Musk's next step was clear. The next phase of the transition required a massive push for infrastructure. He needed to bring together the public and private sectors to rapidly build out the infrastructure for clean energy, solar, and electric vehicles across the globe. The work would need to be done at a scale that had never been attempted before, but Musk was accustomed to working at the edge of what seemed possible. Musk put together an ambitious plan to work alongside governments to develop a global energy network, investing in electric grids that could handle renewable sources of energy. He proposed a new partnership model, one that would unite companies, governments, and nonprofits in a common mission: save the planet. Back at SpaceX, the Mars mission was still progressing. The astronauts had established the first permanent human presence on Mars, and Musk's eyes were on the horizon. As much as he was focused on Earth's future, he couldn't help but think about the long-term vision. The challenges on Earth were immediate, but humanity's expansion into space was an inescapable reality. There was no going back now. The journey had only just begun. Musk's thoughts were interrupted by a knock on his office door. It was Ben, one of his senior engineers at SpaceX. "Elon, we've encountered an issue with the Mars habitat systems," Ben said, a concerned look on his face. "We need to resolve it before we start the second phase of colony construction. If we don't, it could delay our long-term plans for sustainable habitation on Mars." Musk's eyes narrowed. What kind of issue? Environmental control systems. The systems meant to generate oxygen are performing below optimal capacity. We've got backup systems in place, but it's going to take time to fix the issue. We're still in the early stages of the colony's development. Any delay in this phase is critical. Musk let out a deep breath. There was always something. But this was Mars. Everything was critical. There couldn't be room for mistakes. "Let's fix it, Ben," Musk said, his voice resolute. "We've come this far. We can't afford to fail. Get the best minds we've got on this, and keep me updated." As the engineering team at SpaceX got to work solving the problem, Musk returned to the reality of his Earthbound mission. He was juggling two massive, world-altering projects at the same time: saving Earth through sustainable energy and securing humanity's future on Mars. Neither mission could fail. The next few weeks would be critical for both. But Musk knew that this was the type of challenge he had always craved. For him, the stakes had never been higher. On Earth, things were beginning to heat up. While many nations were jumping on board with Musk's call to action, others were resistant. Fossil fuel lobbies were pushing back, and governments with heavy ties to oil and gas companies were reluctant to make the necessary changes. Musk knew this battle wasn't just one of technology, it was political and social. He wasn't just fighting against climate change. He was fighting against the powerful forces that had shaped the global economy for over a century. One day, he found himself face to face with one of the most influential oil barons in the world, Henry Caldwell. Caldwell had been one of the biggest opponents of Tesla's push for renewable energy. "Elon, I've listened to your speeches. You've got a good story, but I don't believe in your vision of a world without fossil fuels," Caldwell said, his tone flat and dismissive. Musk didn't flinch. "It's not about belief, Henry. It's about survival. The world can't afford to keep relying on fossil fuels. The environment is suffering. Economies are suffering. It's not a matter of what I believe. It's a matter of what's inevitable." Caldwell scoffed. "You think you can just turn everything around overnight? The whole world relies on oil. There's no way to simply switch off that tap." Musk leaned in. "I'm not asking you to turn it off overnight. But every day we wait, the future grows bleaker. Our children's futures are on the line. And I'm not going to stand by and let them inherit a world that's been ruined by inaction. You can't stop this change, Henry. It's already happening." Caldwell remained silent for a long moment, staring at Musk. Then, in a rare admission of understanding, he said, "I don't agree with you, but I can see the writing on the wall. Maybe it's time we start working together. The future will decide." Musk didn't know what the future held, but one thing was clear. The battle for humanity's future was only just beginning. The fight for Earth's survival, the struggle to make Mars a reality, and the mission to shift global energy systems were all part of the same unstoppable journey. And Musk was determined to lead it to the very end. Months had passed since Musk had stood at the podium, delivering his impassioned speech at the global summit, and the world had begun to stir. While the change wasn't as swift as Musk had hoped, the momentum had been building. Governments were starting to see the undeniable truth that the future of the planet was directly tied to the future of energy. Renewable sources were no longer just an option. They were the only viable solution. But even as the global energy conversation shifted, Musk knew the road ahead would not be easy. There were still forces in play that would fight every inch of progress. Fossil fuel industries were not going down without a fight. And yet, Musk was determined, more than ever, to drive the change that would save the planet. One of the most significant breakthroughs came when Tesla secured a major partnership with a group of global investors. The deal was a game-changer. It meant that Tesla could finally ramp up production of solar panels and electric vehicles at a scale that would make the transition to renewable energy a real, tangible possibility. "Elon, this is huge," Gwen said as she reviewed the details of the agreement. "This will allow us to scale faster than we ever could before. If we can use this capital to push our tech even further, we'll be able to hit new milestones." Musk smiled, but his mind was already racing ahead. He had a plan for this capital. He wasn't just going to use it to build more cars or solar roofs. This was the moment to invest in the global infrastructure needed to make renewable energy a reality. If he could get electric grids, energy storage solutions, and renewable technology integrated across the globe, the change could happen faster than anyone imagined. "We need to focus on scaling our infrastructure," Musk replied, his eyes glinting with that familiar fire. "This isn't just about Tesla. It's about transforming the whole system. We've got to lead the way in creating the energy systems of the future." The next few weeks were a blur of meetings, strategy sessions, and late nights. Musk was relentless, pushing forward with the energy transition while continuing to oversee the development of the Mars colony. Both projects were critical, and Musk knew that each needed his full attention. In one of his most intense sessions with the United Nations, he addressed the world's leaders, pushing them to take action and invest heavily in the energy infrastructure needed to power a sustainable future. His argument was simple but powerful. Without a complete shift to renewable energy, the world would face catastrophic consequences. "We've seen the effects of climate change firsthand," Musk told the assembly, his voice unwavering. "The time for waiting is over. We know the technology works. We know it's affordable. Now we need the political will to make this change happen. And we need it now." As Musk pushed forward with his global energy strategy, SpaceX's work on Mars was also advancing at a steady pace. The issues with the habitat systems had been resolved, and now, the first signs of a permanent human presence on Mars were beginning to take shape. The colony was still in its infancy, but the groundwork had been laid. Musk knew that the success of the Mars mission was tied to the success of the energy transition here on Earth. If humanity was going to survive on another planet, they needed to be able to live sustainably on Earth and beyond. One evening, as Musk was reviewing reports on both the Mars mission and Tesla's energy grid development, he received a call from an unexpected source, one of the most powerful individuals in the fossil fuel industry, David Langford. Langford was the CEO of one of the world's largest oil companies, and he had been one of Musk's staunchest critics. "Elon," Langford said, his voice tight but civil, "I've been watching you, and I have to admit, what you're doing is remarkable. You've managed to rally the world's attention, and I can see the tide turning. But I've got a proposition for you." Musk was skeptical but listened intently. Langford continued, "I won't lie. My company has been heavily invested in fossil fuels for decades. But even I can see the writing on the wall. We're facing a global reckoning, and I want to be part of the solution, not the problem." Musk leaned forward, intrigued. "What are you proposing, David?" Langford's voice softened. "I want to talk about a partnership. My company has the resources, the infrastructure, and the influence to accelerate this transition. If you're willing to work with us, we can scale up renewable energy solutions faster than you could imagine. We can make this shift happen, together." Musk was taken aback. He had never expected someone like Langford to come to him with an olive branch. But after a few moments of silence, he spoke. "We'll do it on one condition," Musk said firmly. "This partnership needs to be about more than just making money. It's about saving the planet. We're going to push for the kind of change that's necessary to preserve this world and its future." Langford agreed. "No more excuses. Let's make it happen." This new alliance marked a turning point in the fight for Earth's future. Musk had long believed that change could only happen if everyone worked together. This partnership with a major oil company, once unimaginable, could be the catalyst for the global transformation that was needed. With the power of both the tech and energy sectors behind him, Musk now had a chance to accelerate the transition to renewable energy in ways he had only dreamed of. As Musk prepared for his next global summit, he felt a renewed sense of purpose. The road ahead was still long and fraught with challenges, but for the first time in years, he could see the end goal clearly. The world was waking up. The resistance was beginning to crumble, and humanity was on the cusp of a new era, one in which the energy systems of the future would shape the destiny of the planet. Hit subscribe and leave a comment with where you're watching from. We've reached a turning point. Can humanity truly unite to save the Earth? What part will you play in this grand transformation? As Musk stood before the assembled world leaders at the next global energy summit, he knew that the most difficult part of this journey was still ahead. But the progress was undeniable. The vision was clear, and the world, against all odds, was starting to move in the right direction. It wasn't just about Mars. It was about Earth, about saving the planet for future generations. And Elon Musk, once again, was leading the charge. The mission to transform humanity's future had never been more urgent, and Musk was determined to see it through. No matter the obstacles, no matter the opposition. The battle for Earth's future was far from over, but the turning point had come. And with it, the first glimmer of hope. Elon Musk had always believed in the impossible. For years, he had defied the odds, pushing boundaries with Tesla, SpaceX, and his relentless pursuit of a sustainable future for humanity. But now, as the final pieces of his vision began to fall into place, he felt the weight of the world more than ever before. The future of the planet was on his shoulders, and the stakes had never been higher. The world had changed in ways Musk could never have predicted. The agreement with the oil industry had been a game changer, and the global shift to renewable energy was gaining traction. But even with all the progress, there were still powerful forces trying to maintain the status quo. Fossil fuel companies were digging in their heels, fighting every step of the way to keep their grip on the world's energy systems. There was still pushback from governments, corporations, and individuals who felt threatened by the change Musk was championing. But Musk didn't flinch. If anything, the opposition only fueled his determination. He knew that to secure a future for Earth, and for humanity as a whole, he had to push harder than ever before. The latest breakthrough in the energy sector had come with the launch of Tesla's new supergrid technology, a network of interconnected solar power stations and energy storage systems that could provide clean, reliable energy to the entire globe. It was a monumental achievement, one that Musk had dreamed of for years, and it had the potential to revolutionize the way the world generated and consumed power. "We've done it," Gwynne Shotwell said, standing beside Musk as they watched the launch footage of the supergrid. "This is the breakthrough we've been waiting for. It's going to change everything." Musk's face was unreadable, but inside, he was filled with a sense of pride. The technology was sound. The system was efficient. It was everything he had hoped for. But he knew that it wouldn't be enough just to have the technology. Now, he had to make sure the world adopted it. And that meant overcoming resistance from the most powerful interests on the planet. "There's no turning back now," Musk said, his voice firm. "We're not just changing the energy market. We're changing the world. We can't afford to fail." Musk's next move was strategic. He called together the global leaders, CEOs, and key stakeholders who had supported the renewable energy movement. This summit would be the defining moment. It was time to show the world that the future of energy was no longer up for debate. The summit was held in a massive conference center, and the energy in the room was palpable. World leaders from every corner of the globe were in attendance, along with representatives from top tech companies, energy conglomerates, and environmental organizations. Musk stood at the front of the room, his presence commanding attention. "We're standing on the brink of a new era," Musk began, his voice resonating with conviction. "The decisions we make today will shape the world for generations to come. We have the technology to solve our energy crisis. We have the power to reverse the damage we've done to our planet. But that power will only be realized if we act together." The room was silent, hanging on every word. Musk continued, outlining the specifics of the supergrid system, the economic benefits of transitioning to clean energy, and the long-term sustainability of renewable technologies. He spoke with the same passion and clarity that had driven his success in the past, but this time, the stakes were higher. "There are those who will try to stand in our way," Musk said, a hint of defiance in his voice. But the reality is that we cannot afford to wait. We cannot afford to allow the fossil fuel industries to dictate our future. The change is happening, whether they like it or not, and we will make it happen. The room erupted into applause. In the weeks that followed, the global response to Musk's call to action was nothing short of overwhelming. Governments that had previously been resistant to change began to embrace the idea of a renewable energy future. Major oil companies, seeing the writing on the wall, started to invest heavily in clean energy technologies. And ordinary people, inspired by Musk's vision, began to demand change in their own communities. Musk wasn't just leading the charge for clean energy, he had ignited a global movement. People from all walks of life, from rural villages to sprawling metropolises, were uniting in the common cause of protecting the planet. Musk's boldness had inspired a collective will to act. The shift was no longer theoretical. It was happening, and the world was beginning to see the light. But even with all the progress, Musk knew that the hardest part was still ahead. The global transition to clean energy wasn't just about building infrastructure. It was about reshaping economies, industries, and mindsets. It was about convincing the world to radically rethink its relationship with the planet. And that, Musk realized, would require more than just technology. It would require a complete transformation of the way people thought about their role in the world. Musk's focus shifted once again to education. If humanity was going to truly embrace the future, it needed to be equipped with the knowledge and skills to make it happen. He began pushing for educational reforms that would teach the next generation about sustainability, innovation, and the importance of environmental stewardship. The future of the planet depended on the young people who would inherit it, and Musk was determined to ensure they were prepared to lead. As Musk stood in front of a packed auditorium at one of the world's leading universities, he could feel the weight of the moment. This was his chance to reach the next generation, to inspire them to carry the torch for a better future. "You are the future," Musk said to the students. "The decisions you make today will shape the world we live in tomorrow. You have the power to change the world. Don't let anyone tell you otherwise. We've already started the journey, but it's up to you to finish it. We need thinkers, innovators, and dreamers, people who are willing to challenge the status quo and build the future that our planet needs." The students were rapt with attention, their eyes wide with excitement. Musk could see it in their faces, the spark of possibility. He knew that the future was in good hands. As Musk looked out over the progress that had been made, he could see that humanity was on the cusp of a new era. The energy revolution was underway, and it was unstoppable. But even as he basked in the success of his work, he knew that the real challenge was just beginning. The road ahead would be long. There would be setbacks, resistance, and unforeseen challenges. But Musk had never been one to shy away from the impossible. And as he looked out at the horizon, he couldn't help but feel a deep sense of hope. The battle for Earth's future was far from over, but the path was now clear. And as long as Musk was alive, he would continue to fight, to lead, to make sure that the world would have a future worth living in. Hit subscribe and leave a comment with where you're watching from. This is just the beginning. What's the next step in the fight for the future? Will we overcome the challenges ahead? Together, we can build a future that will last. The world was changing, and Musk was determined to make sure that the change was for the better. The journey was far from over, but the future was within reach. And for the first time in a long time, it felt like the impossible was possible. Hit subscribe and leave a comment with where you're watching from. This story might just spark a new beginning. What's one thing that always pushes you forward, even when things get tough?